What's up, everybody? Welcome back to MythVision Podcast. I'm your host, Derek Lambert. I am 38 years of age today. Welcome. We're going to be reviewing a debate between Trent Horn and Alex O'Connor over the resurrection of the dead, and a lot of stuff gets brought up, which I only got to listen to pieces of this. I actually didn't listen to the whole thing, but I was like, dang, okay, Alex is cooking pretty good. He could have nailed Trent even better in many ways, but that's how every discussion / debate goes. Afterward, you think about things, you go, I could have done this better, I could have done that better. But before we get started, I want to say, out of all online Christian apologists, there are a handful that I can point to and say, okay, they are respectful in their engagements. They carry themselves in a way that I think is something anyone should look at and go, okay, that's someone I think deserves an honest engagement, a dialogue back and forth. And others, not so much, right? A lot of pre-suppers. There's so much toxicity right now that I've seen in the apologetic arena that I haven't seen 5 years ago, 6 years ago. It wasn't as intense. Usually it was like the bottom feeders, like the Darth Dawkins and stuff, right? That were like the cringy, super toxic, like over the top toxic kinds. Now you're finding the very toxic kinds to be very popular, and it's really unfortunate. I'd prefer more Trent Horns. I'd prefer more Gavin Ortlands. I'd prefer, if there was going to be any apologist out there, I would prefer ones that act like gentlemen, know how to discuss, disagree, agree to disagree, engage and whatnot, and not play sophistry games. That's something I'd prefer. I hope everybody's doing well. We're going to get to the debate here soon. Solera Night was early. Good to see you, Solera. Good to see you. Thanks for being a member. I really appreciate that. Lori, I think that's how you pronounce your name. Good to see you here. Baron, what is up? Welcome. Thank you so much for being here for 36 months at MythVision as a member. Really wild. Carla, good to see you, Carla. Bakken in the house, and Deborah, good to see you all. I hope everybody's doing well. I look forward to seeing what happens because I've only watched in this hour and a half engagement maybe 10 minutes of this, like 10 minutes. And in fact, I only drew up like one or two sources out the gate that I could think of off the top of my head. As soon as I heard a few talking points from Trent and Alex, I was like, ooh, grabbed a few sources. But then I was like, let's just freestyle this. I mean, do I need to really go and do an exhaustive thing for a live stream? No. I may turn this into a polished, scripted video like I do in some of my stuff where you could tell that I'm scripting it. That way it's more articulate. I'm not umming. I'm not thinking. I'm not sitting here processing it. That's live stream stuff. That's stuff that you're going to get off the cuff with me. Whereas when we're actually doing a rebuttal or something to help educate people, I try to have a polished video. I try to say what I mean and mean what I say. And that way it's pretty succinct and precise. The sources are on the screen. You can go check them for yourself. That's what I'm about. I'm all into that. Kyle, what's up? Good to see you here. XJ, have you checked my email? I have probably checked. I probably have. I don't really know. Over the weekend, we had a lot going on, and it wasn't just my birthday yesterday. I was going to do a live stream yesterday, but I took the family to a movie. And so today, we're doing what I love the most, which is talking about this stuff for my birthday present to you all. So we're gonna hang out. I'm gonna put a little banner actually, in case anyone wants to hook me up with a super chat. I'm always game. Of course, I'll recognize, take questions, comments, critiques, whatever, or advice, because a lot of times I don't know what I'm, I'm not aware of all there is when it comes to this. There's so much you can dig into. Like earlier today, I was thinking of Apollonius of Tyana, and I was like, man, we always like name drop him because Bart Ehrman mentions him. A few other scholars mention him and parallel him with Jesus. But how often do we get a Apollonius of Tyana expert to come on and tell you about Apollonius of Tyana? Like, sure, we can compare him to Jesus, but like, we really should know about this guy and everything there is to know about it from experts who study that guy. not just through the lens of comparing him to Jesus, but through his own right. Anyway, it's my birthday. Hook me up with super chats if you can. Obviously, questions, comments. It always helps. And scroll and boom. Add banner. There you go. So obviously, if you want to hook up, you want to help out, you can. No worries, no sweats. I'll try to keep aware of the chat as we go through and try to answer questions and go through, as we are reacting to Alex O'Connor and them. Happy. Bruno says, a little off topic, but when will you be doing more topics on early Christian Gnostics groups? I love those videos. Good question. I haven't had anything on the radar, so I'm actually doing one right now on. It's going to be a long one. It's going to be a while before this one's out. Where the hell did hell come from? And it's not exhaustive, and yet that video is still close to 3 hours long. So there's just too much. I try to show and explain why a lot of Zoroastrian Persian stuff seems to be imported and why hell seems to have come from there. But I go further back into geology and stuff and show you why the natural observations, the natural resources of the world make the best sense for a fiery underworld with sulfur and, a hell, an underground hell. So I would love to do more on that. I've got stuff that I haven't finished on books that were not made into the canon, were never, canonized. And these are the books people like to know more about, what they're teaching, what they're saying, more Gnostic-y style stuff. I plan on doing more of those. So you've given me some thought on maybe putting a few of those together. I have another one that's coming out. Let me just look it up here so I don't have to do it off memory. I've got one coming, Enoch and Jesus, Two Powers of Heaven. This isn't from Christian, material that is like, ooh, don't read that, Mr. Orthodox Christian. This is from Jewish material. This is Metatron and showing you the building blocks behind how there was a lesser Yahweh. It I think lays the path out for how Jesus could be identified as a god, along with the Mediterranean world. But it's really interesting to hear about Enoch's skin melting off of him and stuff. People get into that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go into that. Of course, where the hell did hell come from? I have another one on Elijah's stolen fire, where I'm going to go through the Elijah story and explain I caught something. I know I'm cutting my sentences off here, but I caught something I never thought about. And if you're watching right now, I'll give you a tease. You can see where this is going. Elijah and the prophets of Baal that are in competition in the Elijah cycle within Old Testament, you're going to see. All right, you know the story, I'm sure. Everybody who's watching right now should know the story of Elijah competing the 450 prophets of Baal. They go on the Mount Carmel and they compete. They're cutting themselves, the prophets of Baal. They're crying out, bleeding, wailing, gnashing their teeth, the whole nine, begging for Baal to answer their prayer and to have fire come down from heaven and consume the altar. They cry all day, nothing happens. Elijah says it, boom, God does it. But he goes even beyond that. He gets 12 barrels, I think 4 times. So it's like 12 times 4 with nothing but water, soaks the altar and the water around the pit, and the fire licks it all up, and God answers the prayer. And of course, then they kill all 450 Baal worshipers, right? And you go, okay, cool. Yeah, I know the story. Whatever. And the Baal worshipers, we're talking about Baal Hadad. If you go to the Canaanite Baal cycle, I'm going to show it in the video and explain that when he dies, drought. When he enters the throat of Mot, which is death, drought. It's a natural observation of the world. It's seasonal. It's yearly. It's cyclical. This later adoption of this idea is in the Phoenician region under, not Eshmun, but Eshmun gets brought up in this video, under Melkart. Melkart is Baal. Okay, he's the Lord there. He also dies of fire, which is an odd element to even bring up in light of the fact that you have an element of fire, lightning specifically, that comes down and absorbs the water and, of course, fires up the altar. So I'm going in these details to highlight something very interesting we've never thought about. We know Jesus is imitating Elijah, but when you look at Elijah closer, he goes into their territory. He's not like in Jerusalem doing this. He goes to the Phoenician territory where Baal-Hadad was supposed to be ruler of. In all of the miracles he does, he raises the widow's son, he does all these miracles. They take place in a geography where the territory or the turf of that area is Baal-Hadad's. So, Yahweh, you'd expect to do it in Israel or in Jerusalem, but not in Phoenician territory. So he's doing miracles in an area that is outside of the land, and it's his God that's doing them. And specifically, the final scene with fire is very important with Melkart, because Melkart, we have actual, if you go read The Riddle of Resurrection by Trygve Mettinger, he has some images of the archaeology from like 5th century BCE, 6th century BCE, something like that, where they show the ritual of the death, dying, and then the resurrecting of Melkart seasonally. Every year, this god would die, and they'd celebrate it, and they'd raise him from the dead. Well, Melkart died by fire, and of course, later Greeks identified Heracles with Melkart. And the same way, Heracles dies by fire as well on a pyre. So I go through and identify this, but I go a step further as well, because in the same region that Elisha and Elijah are in, healing miracles are happening. And there's another god who did healings that was also identified with Asclepius named Eshmun. So I start to show that the cycle of Elijah and Elisha seems to be, I want to use the term hijacking, okay? They are competing with other cults. And those other cults are a healing god named Eshmun, and of course a dying and rising god, Baal-Hadad, Melkart, and going to walk you through that. Sorry for the long, but I think it was worth it. I've also got a Frank Turek debunk coming up where one of these students, asks him something, and of course he just pulls a rabbit out of the hat and does a magic trick, and then, oh, you're so amazing, you're the best, that kind of stuff. So more debunk stuff, I'm sure, but I would like to get more into that outskirt material that didn't quite make it into canon that I think is pretty shocking for most people who've never heard of it. All right. I looked away from the screen and now I'm looking back. So I really, really caught up. I'm probably got to catch up here before we start reviewing this together. Happy birthday, Derek. Mine was the 21st. Awesome. Karosinoke. I probably butchered that. Let's see. Happy birthday, Derek. Thank you so much. The A-Tree guy. I hope I'm not butchering it too bad. This feels very nerdy. Darla, good to see you. Happy birthday. Thank you so much. Bro, hell comes from IE tradition. Mufissalim and Agni consuming Purusha. I've seen your comments before. You see a lot of stuff in Hinduism. It wouldn't shock me if there's some Eastern stuff. I mean, we're talking Persia, which is in the same Eastern territory. I mean, in the similar region of the world as you find in Hindu stuff. It wouldn't shock me at all if there was something there. But I also find there seems to be a growing trend in development, even in the Greek world eventually, is that through Eastern ideas penetrating the Greek world? Maybe. Because when Homer talks about hell or Hades, it's not a place where there's compartments of torture and then, other places where the righteous might be, like we might have, later developments of Tartarus and stuff like that. But everyone goes to the same place. And even the hero Achilles is seen, right? I bring that up in this upcoming documentary. I'd rather be a slave of a peasant, of the poorest person on earth. I'd rather be that person's slave than be down here. That sucks, Okay, Bruno in the house. Thank you so much. Sounds great, Derek. I look forward to it. It would be great to see more videos on the Valentinians and Basilidians. Okay. That's more specific. Let me hold on one second. Let me grab a pen and paper real quick. Here it is. Get my pens. All right. I don't want to forget because I get so much on my plate. You know how it is. All right. So Valentinians and Basilidians. That's pretty easy to. I've been wanting to do more on the Valentinians and the Basilidians anyway. So and what they believe, what they said, why is this so scandalous, and maybe even the evolution of the heresiology. Because once you get to like 4th, 5th century heretic hunters and stuff, are they accurately portraying what the early Christians really believed, or is it a bit like snowball effect and they're now demonizing even more? You know, microwave power. Okay. Oh, the mother Windyberg in the house. What is up? Good to see you. Hello, everyone. Wendy, thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Turned 38 today. And my sister asked me yesterday, do you feel like it? And I'm like, I think I do. I think my body's like going, hey, dude, you don't heal as quick as you used to. I could fall off of a roof when I was 20 and then get up and be a little sore the next day. Today, I'm worried I'd be in the ER. Like, no doubt I'd be in the ER. And I don't know how long it would take to heal, you know? Just literally, what, 15 to 18 years? And you start to, you got to be careful. Great points. Solera, MF, mutual friends. Oh, snap. Okay, hold on. Let me hit this super chat here real quick. Bakken in the house with a 50 bomb. Bakken, thank you so much for the super chat. Holy crap. Happy birthday, my brother. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Yeah, we had a blast yesterday. I really appreciate that, man. That means a lot. I hung out. I got to chill. We went and watched The Mandalorian. We were going to watch what was the Mortal Kombat. We were going to watch that in the movies, and all they had was the very, very, very front row. And me and my wife and kids didn't want to do this the whole time just to watch the movie. So we went to The Mandalorian, and the kids had a good time. And that's what made me have a good time, is they enjoy it. I don't know. You get older and you see your kids having fun. It makes you feel good. That's how I feel, at least. Yes. Happy mother freaking birthday. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Bro, that milk card is totally Purusha, who considered by Agni. One is altar, the other is literally year, so it gets renewed every year. I've got to see all this stuff. And if you have any like actual scholarly resources that make these connections, because we can make connections all day on our own, and that's fun. And nothing wrong with making connections and observations. It's like, I'm looking for like, here's some real linguistic, archaeological, definitive scholarly source material that shows this idea here in India literally influenced in the 5th century BCE. We know that it was imported due to this type of trade route. And here's how we know, or whatever. I need empirical evidence, not just like they have parallels. And I think mine's older, because a lot of this stuff you can trace way, way back, even in the Aegean region in Egypt. You can find parallels everywhere. And I want to be very cautious that, hey, I'm just making an observation of parallels, or I think really this story influenced this one directly. Those are two different approaches. I enjoy both of them, but I would love to see strong evidence to support these cases, if that makes sense. I hope you understand and respect that. I hope I'm not being disrespectful by making that point, because there are two different things. And when I was early on in making parallels, a lot of people were like, oh, parallelomania. And I'm like, I'm not saying because there's a parallel that must have borrowed directly from that. I'm saying there's a floating story or stories around, and people know about these. And in some cases, it might just be we all look up at the same stars, or we all live near bodies of water, and humans tend to have similar patterns. And so they reflect in the stories. But some cases, a lot of cases, there's trade routes. There's direct storytelling passing along these narratives, and it influences the theology. Matt, happy birthday, Derek. Thank you so much, Matt. Let me see. Oh, Ivy Ann. Thank you so much, Ivy Ann. 99. Happy birthday cake. Thank you for the super chat and being a member. Really appreciate the love and support. Thank you. Thank you again. I really appreciate that. Let's see. Almost to level 40. I'm leveling up. I'm leveling up. Okay. I can't wait to get to the big guns, 80s. You know what I mean? Still a kid. I am still a kid. You're 67, Solera. Look at you, 67. That's about my mom's age. Let me close out of here so I don't get any noise. There we go. Okay. Oh, William Arns in the house. Thank you, William. Happy birthday, +1 to Derek, the holy apostate. It's funny you say that. I can't tell you how many Christian friends of mine who say, Derek, I know you say you don't believe, but you're so nice and you're so loving, and you like when they really get to know you, because this is on the internet, right? Like you could go, well, I don't know if Derek's really like this in real life, or if Derek's not like this in real life. Then you meet people and you go, oh, and I've never had a person say, you're different than I thought you were. Like, or meaning they see you online, they think you're going to be different in person. And that happens a lot. People online are not always who they are in real life. And then they meet me like, dude, you're the same mofo. You are the same dude. We're literally watching through the TV and in person. And anyway, so the Christians will always say, like, dude, I know you say you don't believe, but I think God's still using you, man. I believe that you're really truly a Christian. You don't even realize it. I'm like, I take it as a compliment. I'm like, okay, I think they mean really well by that, by like saying you're really a generous, kind, loving guy and all that. So the holy apostate, I'll take it. I'll take it. Okay. I feel like am I way behind? I don't know how far I am on this. No proof of PhD, then it doesn't exist. Fascinating. No proof. I don't understand what's going on here. Okay, you'll get it, but it's not going to be published in Scholarly. I'll trace it through primary source stuff. All right, I'm happy to see what you have. Absolutely. But I do think it's important, obviously, when you have scholarly support, we're not just pulling things out of our hats and say, oh, this is what I think, and therefore, you know what I mean? It's going to be genetical evidence. So if you're going to use any linguistics or philological stuff, that is why I expect philologists to be involved, because I'm not a linguist. And if you're not a linguist in the sense that you actually have philological training, then we got to be careful there. But if you do bring in philology, I'd like to fact check that with someone who actually knows the sources and stuff, can look at the material and go, okay, maybe there's something to this. Because scholars all the time, I'm going to say this one thing here. You got some people who are like, they die on the consensus without any boundary pushing. Okay. I'm not that. But then you have some who are like, consensus is evil, and I have to only come up with things that they don't have. And I'm not that either. I'm far from that. I do think it's important that we are aware of what the field says about a certain thing and why, and then move from there. So if you say, I just don't think they're going far enough, but here's my reasoning, and you could still man where they're at and why they're where they're at, makes sense. I'll give you an example. How many times have you watched MythVision in the past year, and you hear me talk about later dating of the Hebrew Bible, or you hear me talk about Greek influence on Genesis? I did a recent interview with some scholars that think that the Eden story in Genesis was influenced by book 5 of the Odyssey. I can't wait to watch the Odyssey. I'm excited. Can't wait to see how the movie turns out. But you go, hold on, the Eden story is Mesopotamian, dude. You've got obviously this garden and a man and a woman made from clay, and the god gets his hands dirty and breathes life into them. And of course, her name, Eve, the mother of the living, coming out of the man's rib. And if you go back to some of the Mesopotamian sources, you'll see that there's even a play on the name, which the rib woman, the giver of life, I can't remember exactly the technical term, but this is Mesopotamian. And then I just interviewed some scholars who pointed out, trying to think of the name, Jan Kozlowski and Sławomir Polacek. Those two Polish academics highlight how Genesis 2 and 3 is borrowing from Odyssey 5 in the form we have it. They don't deny Mesopotamian background, but I know by reading what the scholars say about Genesis 2 to 3 and its Mesopotamian background, and I've asked some of the leading experts like David Carr, when I interviewed him, I said, why do you think it is that scholars in Hebrew Bible never notice the Greek parallels or think that Greek sources might have been the antecedents to what we're finding in Genesis? They said, because we're not trained to look there. We're Semiticists. We look at Semitic languages. We look at Akkadian and Sumerian. We look at Eastern, Near Eastern stuff. We aren't trained to look at Greek. And that's a blind spot, he said. So that's one of the reasons. He admits it, and I think, and I go, interesting. So it's worth knowing those things before we move to anything else. I'm 50 next to me. I'm not sure how I made it this long. Me neither. I'd love to see the Hurrian Song of Emergence get some attention. Bronze Age roots of Kronos deposing Uranos Kumarbi. Oh, like the Song of Uli Kumi? Song of Emergence. I think that's the Song of Uli Kumi, but I could be. By the way, I do bring up the Song of Uli Kumi in my Where the Hell Did Hell Come From? Song of Emergence. I think this is Hittite, if I'm not mistaken. Kumarbi. Okay, just writing down some stuff here so that I can. Okay, when we covering the debate, homies, I know, right? I do need to listen to your chats here, Bakken. Forgive me. It's been a heck of a weekend. Another super chat, Solera Knight. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. I really do. Derek, personal question. Do you believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead? Explain answer. No, I don't. I do believe that they thought that it was going to be an actual resurrection. I think this is the hard part between belief, what we think of belief, but I do not think that Jesus rose from the dead. Of course, you guys know that I think there probably was a guy named Jesus who existed, a Jewish teacher. And I think that there's too much going on with the belief of resurrection, even within just the Jewish system itself. You have individuals who rise from the dead in narrative form. So I don't think a Lazarus was ever risen from the dead. I don't believe the widow's son, the widow of Nain's son, was raised from the dead. But these are individuals who rose from the dead in these stories. Now, when you get to Paul, a lot of scholars like to go, the Gospels are full of legends. We're willing to go, maybe that's fictional, maybe that's fictional. Paul's not. I don't know. A lot of scholars like to take Paul and go, no, this is literal. They really believe this. And if you take that approach, playing in the sandbox, that they really believe something happened to Jesus's body, this is something we're going to have to get into in this debate review, because Trent Horn is trying to make the body physical. And guess what? Trent, I think, is right. In the philosophical categories of the ancient world, physical is right. I think it's a good term. But you might go, but what do you mean, physical? Physical doesn't mean not spiritual. You get past like the Cartesian ideas that we see in philosophy later, where they're trying to compartmentalize material, tangible, physical, spiritual, immaterial. But that's not how Stoics looked at the world. And Paul is a middle Platonist. We're going to get into that. We're going to have to talk about that. Trolls Ingberg Peterson, Paul on Identity, but he also has another book. I have the ebook on here. The name of that is not that one. That's the Corinthian Body. That's Del Martin. Cosmology and the Self and Apostle Paul. He points out Paul is a middle Platonist. Okay. When you read Paul and you understand, he starts to describe what kind of body Jesus is supposedly raised of. It's a substance like the stars. It is pneumatic. And many other philosophers identified the pneumatic body of people. Pneuma, they would just say the pneuma is fire or ether. It's a substance that is not visible. It's made of something of heavenly source. It's physical, though. Pneuma is like wind. When you watch a tree bend, something physical makes it bend, but you can't see it. It doesn't have that, I see what's hitting the tree, causing the tree to bend. We just notice the tree bending when the wind blows. And so another scholar, M. David Litwood, talks about this. So I know I'm getting into the nuts and bolts, which our debate we're going to review talks about, but I do not believe Jesus rose from the dead, just as I do not believe any other character in antiquity or any other miracles of that nature actually happened. Now, you can go through different paths of explaining how that is, whether you think this is narrative, whether you think this is fictive, whether you think this is propagandistic, because you can see a little bit of both possibly. Like, did Vespasian really step on a withered man's hand in the Serapean temple in Alexandria? And the withered hand got healed? Did he really spit in a man's eyes and make the blind man see again? If you want to believe the Emperor Vespasian had healing abilities, then sure. There's also part of me that goes, it's kind of what you do for your cult. It's kind of what a cult would have about their leader. They have abilities. They're capable of doing these things. So I'm mixed between real faith healer types like we see on TV, the Benny Hinn style types, but here they are in Galilee doing this kind of stuff, or in Alexandria for the emperor, and propaganda, fiction, etc. But I do not think anyone actually rose from the dead, period. So I don't know if that explains it, because that's a big question, and there's a lot more I could get into about it. But Solera, I appreciate that. Happy birthday, Thomas. Thank you. Garrett, thank you. I'll be 77 in 2 weeks. Daniel, good to see you, my friend. Off topic, do you plan on any interviews with Steve Mason? I love this guy, and his perspective on early Christianity is amazing. I would love to. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to anytime soon. I spoke to him. He's got a lot going on. He did help me with a recent documentary, in case you didn't watch that, on the channel, where we cover his connections between Josephus and Luke Acts. He wrote the whole script. It's like a 3-hour documentary. I would love to. If I do, it'll be an audio podcast, which is unfortunate because most of you are looking forward to a video, but we shall see. I am in contact with him on a regular, so I could shoot him a text anytime and see if he's available. Okay. XJ says, I'm very aware of the field. I'm not going to go against them where I can't. I use a lot of their evidence. I just have a different interpretation. I've watched their methodology, etc. Awesome. Send me what you have, brother. Looking forward to it. Bias training. Ribbon women. Ninty. That's right. The rib woman. Ninty. Yes. You know what I'm talking about, Wendy. Apologia in the hizzy. Good to see you, Paul. We had the same birthday last year, too. What are the odds? Paul, good to see you. It's been a long time, man, since I've seen you in the chat. I know. What are the odds? I mean, how could we dare have the same birthday every year? What's up with that? I don't know. I've been loving what you've been doing lately, man. You're doing some awesome work. For those who don't know, Paul has a great YouTube channel. You got to go subscribe. He's been doing a bunch of absolute takedowns of apologetics that I've been seeing. He's had a lot of Bart Ehrman come on recently. Love what you're doing. Love you, man. I hope that people go subscribe and check out your channel and continue to support what you're doing. It's in my morning routine. When you drop a video, my breakfast is there, and I'm enjoying some apologia. All right. I'm just going to say it, man. You do great. So appreciate you joining me and showing up and showing some love. Happy birthday, by the way, to you, Paul. Hey, famous person in the chat. Let me keep going. Let me scroll down. I got to catch up because we won't ever review the video if we don't. Hey, bro, Sitorni, thank you so much. Hey, bro. Any quick thoughts on William Lane Craig versus Alex? Haven't watched it yet. It's on my list. Will you review that also? Sure. Why not? I'm not a philosopher, though. I know they get into some philosophy, so above my head. That doesn't mean I'm not dabbling and learning about philosophy as we speak and listening to ancient philosophy, trying to get my mind wrapped around modern stuff. But a lot of that kind of stuff is not in my wheelhouse, I must confess. But I'd be happy to review it to see how that goes, even as a layperson. I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert or that I know something. Love your work. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Thank you for the support. Let me keep going. I want to make sure. Acharya, good to see you. Been watching your channel since the beginning. From a Hindu background, I feel relieved that no God is so needy to get into personal relationship with me. And here's no theological dogmas and taboos. Awesome. Feels good to know from a Hindu background you're watching our channel. I love it. I love it. I do indeed, even if I didn't catch that typo. Absolutely. Dark-Eyed Gazelle, thank you so much for showing love here. Side Quest, happy birthday, dude. Apologia, happy birthday. Save some nectar for other bees. Love you, man. Yes, indeed. Thank you so much. Okay, well, let's get to it because there's so much in this debate. And I started at the very beginning. I'm like, this is my kind of thing. I like this stuff. So make sure you smash the like button. Share this bad boy out there. Let's listen to what they have to say. Feel free to super chat questions, comments. I'll find a sweet spot. Pause. I'll probably allow a few to collect, and then I'll address them, and we can have some fun from there. I will pause and give my commentary as we go. And please, again, share this thing out there. Let's get some noise out there and show some support. Here we go. If I can find it. There we go. There we go. Here we go. Is this it? No? That's my video. Let me find the debate. Where did I put it? Oh, there it is. Here we go.
Did Jesus rise from the dead? I'm John Nelson, and today on Unbelievable, we have two exceptional guests discussing the resurrection. Joining me in the studio is Alex O'Connor, a public philosopher and host of the Within Reason podcast. And joining us online is Trent Horn, a Catholic apologist at the Council of Trent. Alex, I know you've debated Trent a couple of times before, and I
just have to say this again. We're getting started. I would love to meet Alex one day. He knows me. We've spoke, all of that, but I'd love to actually have deep dive discussions. I'm talking about in the weeds, into the sources, things you never heard him talk about that I do talk about, and get his thoughts as someone who's a sharp thinker. But Trent Horn is someone that I do respect, even though I disagree with him at the end of the day. Among apologists, he's one of the top, I'll say, gentlemen, even if I disagree.
You once described him as your most formidable debating partner. Are you ready for round 2 or 3?
I can't wait. I did, in part because Trent was one of my early debates. I mean, back in probably 2019 or 2020 or something, we had an online debate, and I remember thinking, gosh, these things sometimes take a bit more preparation than you might have thought. But the thing I like most about Trent, I think, is he seems like just a decent bloke who's interested in having good conversations. So I'm kind of looking forward to this. Yeah.
Well, it's so good to have you both on Unbelievable. Trent, maybe we can just dive right in with the argument. Before the show began, we were discussing how your approach might differ from some other apologetic approaches to the resurrection.
By the way, at some point when my schedule permits, I'm going to be able to go and visit Trent, and we're going to meet in person, and we're going to actually have a deep dive discussion as well. I'm not sure when that'll work for him and us, but maybe sometime this year I'll be able to go to Texas in studio, discuss, debate, whatever, and have a back and forth gentleman, discussion and see how that goes.
Can you just outline, how would you make your historical case for the resurrection of Jesus?
Sure. And once again, I really want to thank Alex for being here. It's a joy to get to speak with him again. We had one formal debate before on Pints with Aquinas, and then we had kind of an informal back and forth with Capturing Christianity a few years ago. So it's been a little while. Mm-hmm. I appreciate the description, most formidable opponent. I worry always when the bar is set so high. What one finds in these situations, it's good to set the bar extremely low when it comes to expectations. But if I can just be a good bloke or a decent chap, that is something I aim to do. When I speak to people, I do get concerned, and when you see people trying to put forward, I think, Alex, I'd love for your thoughts on this, maybe on a future episode, something for you to talk about. When it comes to putting forward a defense of the Christian faith, I've noticed a little bit of a shift in the past 10, 15 years in how Christians go about that. And a lot of Christians now have become much more aggressive and very, not even just forthright, but aggressive, even profane, kind of no holds bar, like taking the worst of the new atheist internet stuff and putting forward. And then they're also kind of light on the substance. And I don't like that. I think that we should follow the facts and the evidence, let it speak, and we don't have to be over exaggerated or especially not profane in how we engage it. So
just I can't help but chime in on this one. Everybody probably watched my recent little video where I was talking about David Wood and Andrew Wilson, right? Well-known two guys. This was such a really toxic exchange between the two guys. But I believe Trent Horn was on the receiving end as a Christian apologist in the Catholic arena by Andrew Wilson on Twitter and other places. I wouldn't be shocked if the Jay Dyers and all these kind of guys were attacking him as well. And Trent's just a polite guy that you can disagree with. And, you may not care for what he argues. That's fine. But he's not into this recent trend of Christians being overly toxic, completely abusive in that way. And I encourage anyone who's not a Christian to try and refrain from that. Okay. Do not behave the way you despise those on the opposite end or in different tribes behave. I would ask that you have patience and understand that many, obviously, if they're douchebags, block and move on. That's my recommendation. Don't get your hands dirty. That's my encouragement. But if they're, Christians and you were one, all I ask, and I'm not speaking for what you should do, I'm encouraging that you were there at one point and try to remember that. That's all we can do, is try to remember what it was like when we were there, because they are going on their own journey, and hopefully they can say, one day, hey, wow, I used to despise you or disagree with your arguments or thought you're so wrong. And then something happened in their lives, or they're learning and they go, I actually started to be more receptive to the arguments you were making. And I'm thankful that you weren't completely a dick the whole time, because you're not winning people over with that kind of, with that kind of abusive nature that a lot of these people have. And Trent was recently abused by a lot of these online apologists. And I think that's why he keeps repeating that, because it sucks. It sucks when your own team is attacking you. You know what I mean? Or supposed to be your own team, but clearly they're not.
When it comes to the evidence of the resurrection, I've noticed, like in the past 10 years, I've studied a lot between, two groups that often debate this. You'll have skeptics on one side, like Alex, or previously debates, like Richard Dawkins or Christopher Hitchens. And then you have a lot of evangelical apologists, people like William Lane Craig and Mike Licona. And one thing I've noticed that they both kind of have in common is they're very skeptical towards non-Protestant supernatural things. So, for example, I've watched in debates where William Lane Craig or Mike Licona or others are, will talk about, how do you explain these groups of individuals, groups of disciples claim to see the risen Jesus? I mean, group hallucinations are almost unheard of. And so, like, a lot of my case will be similar to theirs, saying we have really good historical evidence. When it comes to showing the resurrection, it's basically showing three facts. Jesus was alive, then he was dead, then he was alive again. So whatever the evidence that would show he was alive in the first place should be good enough to show he's alive in the second place. And that is people seeing that he's alive. And
there's so much to unpack in everything he just said. And I'm not going to do all of that now, but I will say this. He was bringing up famous, Hitchens and Dawkins. And it's interesting. Those are the two that pop up on his mind other than Alex, because you would think, I don't know, this is just me thinking, you would think an expert or experts in that field in New Testament studies around this topic who aren't believers would be go-to guys on listening to why they don't believe the resurrection happened, instead of Hitchens or Dawkins. Don't get me wrong. One's a biologist. One is an excellent rhetorician. And I don't know exactly everything Hitchens has his skill set in, but he was one of the greats, right, in terms of debating. But there were other people. There have been other debates. Like, take Bart Ehrman, for example. I know he knows this, but he didn't name him. And I'm like, well, he's a big name to not name in this area. So anyway, constantly Protestant jabs. And he's saying Jesus was alive, he's dead, and then he's alive again. And so he takes those that's what apologists do. They flatten out, like, that's the same evidence that he was alive is the same evidence we have that he was alive again, originally alive, alive again. And that's why I like comparative mythology. I love comparative mythology because you have already precedent in narrative form that predates thousands of years if you go back to Inanna. But you have this with Osiris, and it may not be identical. Oh, Osiris resurrected, but he resurrected to rule the netherworld. Who cares? The narrative has him die and then come back. Baal, from the Baal cycle, dies, is in the throat of Mot. Anat, his consort / sister, comes and saves the day, splits him in two and rescues Baal. When Baal resurrects, the text literally cries out that he is raised. He is alive again. And then the wadis run and flow with water. There is a resurrection. You have Heracles resurrects. You have various stories where people were alive. Something cruel happens to them in the story, and then they're resurrected again and they're alive again after. I don't know how that doesn't play an impact on people's thinking as far as a text that has someone born of a divine father and a mortal woman. It starts with fiction. It ends with fiction. And where that line of fiction and history meets is the wrestling ground. But, like, I don't know how this does not play some kind of role when we analyze narratives such as the birth, death, and resurrection of Jesus. It just is baffling to me.
Especially groups of people seeing this as recorded in 1 Corinthians. I also think we have
groups of people. He mentioned this about group hallucinations and stuff, and I'm sure he's going to get into, I think if I recall, like Marian apparitions and stuff. I remember, I'm going to give you a personal story here real quick. This is short, but I remember I took a bunch of ecstasy. I was a young kid, stupid, dumb, wanting to, roll on ecstasy. I took 2.5 of these things called white naked ladies. One side had a G spot on it. The other side had a white naked lady on it. Okay. I was gone. I mean, I'm talking about this stuff was super powerful. I'm in the jacuzzi in the backyard at my mom's, and me, my brother, and my friend Devin are there, and we're talking, and I remember it starts to kick in. And I'm talking about my week. I was reading the Bible at school. I was struggling between wanting to party and then also trying to get my grades right and do good. And I'm sitting here reading the Bible thinking, I'll just give Jesus more of my attention. I'll do better. And I was going through the Bible from the beginning, and I was at the part where Moses is going up on the mountain to get the 10 Commandments. Well, I start telling them this. They don't like it. My brother and this guy, Devin, are like, bro, we can't talk about this right now. That's bad. You're talking about good things. We're doing bad. You can't talk about good while we're doing bad. So we all start getting, it like was messing our trip up, and I was not feeling right, and they weren't feeling right. All of a sudden, I saw something. It looked like a horned, dark shadow monster, okay, with really, really dark eyes. I'm talking about freaky, sharp teeth and everything in my brother. My brother says he saw something. Devin says he saw something. We all three say that we saw something. Now, if I could play the movie back so you could see everything that led up to it, why there was already so much going on psychologically that was building up to this experience that we all had. We all took the same amount of drugs. We were all not right, okay? Then I go inside. I was speaking in tongues. I started hearing laughing and all this kind of stuff. Like I thought speaking in tongues would help me somehow because I'm a Christian. We go inside, and my wife is pregnant with my firstborn son, and I'm sitting there like in bed, like going, God, help me feel better. I don't want to do this anymore. I remember going to school telling kids, don't do drugs. Don't do ecstasy. It's demonic. It's evil. Well, when we play the tape back and me and my brother and Devin were talking about it, when they described what they saw, it wasn't what I saw. We didn't see the same things. We all had a similar phenomena experience while we were on drugs, but we did not see the same things. So even if you took the Corinthian, he appeared to us, to the bank, you don't know what they saw. They claim it was Jesus, but you can get down into the weeds if you really want to and realize like maybe they were all in a meditative state. Maybe they're all in a really traumatic state, and they're also looking for religious confirmation. So they thought they heard or saw something, and then everyone says, Jesus appeared to us or he came to us or something. It could be that simple. It could be dreams. It could be, there's so much. Paul G was in here earlier. I don't know if he's still here, but he talks about how there's this like almost contagion that happens when an individual says they saw the Lord, maybe through a dream, a vision, whatever, hallucination, then everyone else starts saying they saw it. Well, what if they just lumped them together here in 1 Corinthians 15? What about the idea that this potentially is interpolated? I know people. I know obviously Robert Price is one, but I talked to Richard Carrier just the other day about this. And so what do you think about the interpolation model of 1 Corinthians 15? He said, well, there is an oddity going on between James and the apostles and the 12 and Cephas. Something odd is going on in that formula in 1 Corinthians 15. Maybe they did interpolate some of the stuff. So he's like, I don't know. I'm not sure, Anyway, there's options here, but they take it bona fide fact. It happened, take it to the bank, and I'm much more skeptical.
Good historical evidence for Luke's account of these group appearances that Luke, as the atheist Richard Carrier says, is a better than average historian, which is a lot from a very critical atheist like Richard. So what will happen in these situations?
I didn't know he was going to name Richard Carrier, and then you named him. Interesting.
Bart Ehrman. I've seen others say, well, why don't you believe in these, groups of people say that they saw the Virgin Mary at Fatima or the Virgin Mary at Zaytun, Egypt. And we even have photographs of this apparition that has appeared that hundreds of thousands of people saw this illuminated figure at Zaytun. Travis Doomsday did a whole academic book that recently on the Zaytun apparition, and he finds it inexplicable. Dale Allison, who I know you spoke with recently, Alex,
Yes.
He finds it just inexplicable, because even the Egyptian authorities shut off the electricity to the area, and yet this illuminated figure that looks a lot like the Virgin Mary still appeared. So for me, I take a more middle ground, saying,
hold on, I don't know how much more they're going to get into this, but I know that there weren't just Christians who supposedly experienced this and they walked away saying this was like the mother of the prophet in Islam. So Muslims saw the same experience that Christians are identifying as Mary and said, no, this is the mother of Islam, of Muhammad. And there are natural explanations. I'm not going to bring these out here because I need to polish this up for a video that Cameron Bertuzzi was challenging me on Facebook about, saying, hey, look, once you look into these miracles, then I'd look forward to seeing your critique, your critical video responding to these various Marian apparitions. And so I want to polish that. It's going to take me some time to do, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think that was a supernatural event. And also I think these other events like Fatima or Zaytun, for me, they lend evidence to Jesus's resurrection, because if Jesus did rise from the dead, these appearances of his mother would not be unexpected. I'd expect a son to take care of his mom, take her up to heaven, and she might go talk to the faithful. But if Jesus did not rise from the dead, these sorts of apparitions and appearances would be very unexpected. So I'm open more.
Real quick, what does he think about the Ganesha drinking milk miracle? Let me pull this up. This is worth showing everybody because, I mean, and this is one example. This one's a really popular one, which is why I'm choosing it, because it had millions of people, not 70,000 like the one he wants to talk about with Mary. This one right here, let me zoom in so everybody could see. The Ganesha drinking miracle was a phenomenon which occurred on the 21st of September 1995, in which statues of the Hindu deity Ganesha were observed to be drinking milk offerings. It is considered one of the largest claimed mass miracle events in modern history, with milk being sold out in hours. The news spread very quickly in various Indian and American cities as Indians everywhere tried to feed idols of Ganesha with milk and spread the news through telephones and word of mouth, attracting significant attention in the Indian media. The phenomenon became global, involving millions of Hindus, and was seen with Ganesha statues in India, Malaysia, Europe, America, Kenya, and Fiji, among other nations. Reports of such miracles have occurred after, but never to the same scale. Now, this is where I like to look at. Scientific investigations have described the incident as occurring through, I believe that's capillary action. And I think if you look carefully, you could see, like, in half a minute, or is it 0.5 of 1 minute, look at the liquid at the bottom. Actually, let me just click this so you can see the image bigger. So if you notice the absorption of the fluid into the actual statue or the concrete or the substance that these statues would have been made out of, after 64 minutes, look at all of that liquid it absorbs. So scientists, and this is what I would do with the Zaytun or any of these miracles, I'd look at it like this for a natural explanation or a natural means and say, hey, can this be explained naturally? Is there a way to explain it? If there is a way to explain it, then I would just put on a prior probability scale, this is much more likely than the miracle you are claiming. And so this has been clearly the way they've dismissed the drinking of the milk by the statues is through this capillary water or capillary milk absorption into the statues. And let's see, Latin word capillaris, meaning of or resembling hair. The meaning stems from the tiny hair-like diameter of a capillary. Anyway, the first recorded observation of capillary action was Leonardo da Vinci. That goes to the history. Back to the statue. So before dawn on 1995, a worshiper at the temple of southern New Delhi made an offering of milk to a statue of Ganesha. When a spoonful of milk from the bowl was held up to the trunk of the statue, the liquid appeared to disappear, apparently taken in by the statue. Word of the event, I think Apologia, if he's still in the chat, word of the event spread quickly. And by mid-morning, it was claimed that statues of the entire Hindu pantheon and temples all over India were taking in milk. And by the way, this had millions of people all over the world, not 70,000, which is a massive number. But if millions of people are gullible in buying into this and thinking this is a miracle, why couldn't the same be said of, these Zetoun or the various other Marian apparitions or any other miracle claims that Christians often make? Just asking. Asking for a friend, fam. All right, let's go back.
So that there's many strange and odd things that happen. Some of them can be explained naturally, but many I don't think can. So I think that we should follow evidence. We shouldn't necessarily rush to supernatural explanations, but we should see which explanation best accounts for everything without cramming the evidence, without bringing in outside ad hoc explanations. And I think Jesus rising from the dead really does do a good job of explaining a lot of the data surrounding Jesus's resurrection, but also these other supernatural events throughout history that are connected to the Christian faith. So that's kind of how I look at it.
Alex, I was recently hosting your tour across the UK, an evening with Alex O'Connor, and so many people wanted to find out about what you thought about apparitions. I don't know if that's something you've looked into a lot, or what do you make of this kind of additional case for the resurrection?
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Because a lot of the time when arguing with a Protestant, you can say something like, well, then how do you explain the Marian apparitions? And with a Catholic, that doesn't quite fly. I suppose I have a general suspicion of these kinds of religious events. And that's not to say that they didn't happen, but to say that insofar as concerns my faith in the resurrected Jesus, they don't do very much. And I can tell you why. It's because I don't think that such experiences are unique to the Christian tradition. Although sort of the experience of a bodily risen Christ by multiple people all at once is definitely something that would be unique in history. You don't get group hallucinations of that kind of physical kind. There are a few things I want to say. Firstly, you do have inexplicable group visions of, I think, equally inexplicable events, which I'll give you some examples of. And secondly, I'm actually not quite sure of the nature of the resurrected Jesus as reported in the Gospels. There seems to be at least a bit of a back and forth amongst the Gospel authors and within Paul's letters as to the physicality of Jesus' resurrection, leading some scholars to posit things such as trans-physicality and this kind of stuff to explain why at some points it seems like Jesus is this ghostly figure who tells people not to touch him and can move through walls, and how Paul says that flesh and blood can't inherit the kingdom, and all of this kind of stuff. And 2 Peter talking about how he has this tent of a body that he will one day get rid of, as we've seen Christ essentially do. But at the same time, you have these, I think, polemical moments of Jesus saying, no, like, touch my feet, watch me eat some fish. Seems like a sort of odd thing to prioritize. Unless you want to say that the glorified, resurrected body gets hungry very easily. It seems strange that one of the first priorities of Jesus would be, give me the fish so I can eat it in front of you and prove that I'm physical. It would seem a little bit strange. On the point of sort of group hallucinations, as it were, I don't know if these things occur. What I know is that we've got lots of reports throughout history of people claiming to see some very strange things. I like to talk about Mormonism, and I like to do it for a few reasons.
So he went over a lot of stuff there, and I don't know what kind of setup this is for debate, but there's a shifting to many topics. So it's hard to explain to someone in a short period of time, like very quickly, what Paul has in mind when he talks about the body of Jesus's pneumatic body. But I would just say, read the chapter, 1 Corinthians 15, and he goes on to describe celestial bodies as pneumatic bodies, that it's not just him. Cicero describes this. Other philosophers of the time describe it, as I mentioned earlier, that pneuma is like, not only is it breath, like breathing, but it's like ether or fire. And some describe it in this way. It's a substance. It is a thing. It is not a non-thing. It is not a completely invisible metaphysical thing that doesn't have tangibility, but it is clearly not the same body. And Paul does not think flesh and blood will enter the kingdom of heaven. Though Luke wants to talk about flesh and bone, which is odd. So something's going on between Paul and Luke and John, specifically with the body of Jesus in this regard, but the substance of it is pneumatic. It's not the corpse that you would see going into the grave that comes back. That is where I think the Orthodox or the Christians such as Trent would die on the hill, and that someone like Alex or critical scholars would look at this and go, nah, Paul doesn't have that kind of idea that you think in mind. He's not thinking the way later Christians who have these formulas by which you must have and believe in order to be an okay Christian. No, these kind of theologies developed later, and Paul's not concerned with that exact thing. That doesn't mean that Paul doesn't believe he rose, but what is that? What kind of body does he actually come out with, right? In Paul's view. He then shifted to Mormonism, but before we move on to Mormonism, and I can't wait to hear him talk about this because it's an interesting topic that I think needs more reflection by apologists today. There's a lot of Mormon apologists who are competing in the arena along with other Christians. And that is, there was a study, let me see if I have it here, David Blackbourn's Harvard Press book on MythVision, I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it, MARPINGEN apparitions. Let me pull this up, see if there's a Wikipedia page I can show you. Because this one was investigated by the Catholic Church, and it was dismissed. And when this study came out by David Blackbourn in his Harvard Press book, and he talks about the MythVision apparitions in 1876 Germany, it documents an event that had 3 child seers, tens of thousands of pilgrims, claims of miraculous cures, and a sustained popular following. The Vatican rejected it. They rejected dozens of other apparitions on similar evidence. Blackbourn shows the criterion for acceptance was political and ecclesial, not evidential. If the church's own selection process is political, citing the accepted apparitions as supernatural while ignoring the rejected ones with comparable evidence is exactly the cherry picking Trent is supposed to be above. So he's clearly, he talks about the ones he accepts, but I don't think he would accept this one. So Trent will present like Zeton, if that's how you pronounce it, Zeitoun, as if no serious scientist has offered an account. That is false as well. Michael Persinger of Laurentian University and John Durr of the U.S. Geological Survey published a paper in Perceptual and Motor Skills in 1989 titled Geophysical Variables and Behavior, LIV, Zeton, Egypt, apparitions of the Virgin Mary as tectonic strain-induced luminosities. They show the luminous phenomena correlate with a tenfold increase in regional seismic activity. The mechanism isn't fully nailed down, but candidate mechanisms include, I'm going to butcher this, piezoelectric effects from stressed rock. Trent cites Travis Dumsday as if he's a neutral evaluator. He isn't. Dumsday is an Orthodox philosopher at Concordia University of Edmonton who worships at Holy Trinity Orthodox Church. His Zeton book is published by St. Vladimir's Seminary Press, the major Orthodox academic publisher. And it goes on, the book opens by declaring that the Zeton apparitions constitute powerful evidence for the reality of the supernatural. So anyway, I would look at the naturalist explanations before I would jump on the supernatural ones. Real quick, Solera Knight, thank you for the super chat. Yahweh sends strong delusion that they should believe a lie and be damned who believe not the truth. ? 2 Thessalonians 2. God's strong delusion? I find this at least a thought experiment worth addressing. Let me pop up here. If God can send delusions, if we could go back in time and interview, pretend for the sake of argument, Paul was a false apostle. Something appeared to him. He had some experience. Let's just grant that, because even that can be debated. So, I mean, how can you know this to be the case? It's written in ancient literature. You've got scholars, and I'm not saying they're right. Where's the book at? So you've got scholars who are questioning Paul's epistles. Nina Livesey, I was going to pull her book up just to show it. I like to wave it. So in case you're interested in ever looking up her books, she's got a book. It shows that she thinks that Paul's epistles may actually be epistolary fictions. Either way, All right. If Paul, let's say, really had sincere experiences and he says, hey, I really believe this and it's the Lord, it's this apocalypse within him. The Greek is specifically Christ reveals himself in him, whatever that means, okay? But it's in him, like an apocalypse within him. He has this experience. Christians buy it. Paul's right. We believe we're going to follow what Paul said. You don't know if what he said is true. But let's say we could time machine and interview him and he goes, no, this is real. He appeared to me and he told me this, blah, 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 blah. But then you can open up the same book and you go, yeah, but God sends lying delusions all the time and he tricks prophets. He's even lied to prophets. Paul claims to be a prophet. For those who don't know, in the New Testament, Paul literally describes himself as a last days prophet. Shows that prophets do this too, that God in the Hebrew Bible sends lying spirits and deceives people all the time. How do you know he's not lying to you? How do you know you're not deceived? It's a worthy thought experiment. And imagine how many Jews who didn't accept, let's say, that their Messiah could die and rise again from the dead, who thought there's a delusion, a lying spirit was sent to these people. And they believed that they were lying. But then the Christians believe the identical opposite. Oh, their hearts are hardened. Quoting Paul in Romans 9. Oh, their hearts were hardened. He did it to Pharaoh. The Jews are currently under their stumbling block. The gospel's a stumbling block and their hearts are hardened. It's interesting to hear all sides use these things. You could never tangibly get to any of this evidence, but they just can throw a scripture out and be like, yep, God sends lying spirits. If the Bible never said God sent any lying spirits and never like purposely deceived, never tried to harden someone's heart after he told Moses, go, tell him, let my people go. As if God wants his people to be let go, Moses does what he says. And then as he's going to tell him, it says God hardened his heart so that he won't let his people go. It's like, which is it? Do you want your people to be let go or not? You know, when you read text like that, it can raise doubt. That's what I'm reading out of what you gave me, Solera. I hope I'm drawing valid conclusions here. Believe a lie, LOL. Strong delusion becomes the myth, not the physical natural truth. Well, I think the belief in it clearly, for someone like me who's looking at this in hindsight, I think humans are humans. Whether they're buying a story that was told because they think it's literary, whether it's an actual psychological phenomena in which you can try to explain, I think there are natural reasons to explain them. And yeah, that would be the approach I personally would go down. Thank you. Here we go.
Firstly, because it usually offers a bit of a sort of left field comparison for Christians, but also in this context, I know that Trent has spent a lot of time looking into Mormonism and debating Mormonism. I would like to tell people, for example, that if you pick up any copy of the Book of Mormon, it always begins with testimonies from first the 3 witnesses and then secondly the 8 witnesses. And these are men who claimed to see, in the first instance, Joseph Smith, the golden plates of Joseph Smith be handed by an angel to Joseph Smith. Now, those first 3 witnesses claim that they saw this. Now, it's a little bit complicated because it's like 2 of them saw it at the same time and then 1 of them saw it later. And you might say that he was hallucinating, but I would say, how do you account for the corroboration between that and the other 2? At the very least, these men who claimed to see something, again, collectively, which I don't think Trent can grant happened. I don't think he can grant that an angel gave Joseph Smith the golden plates. And yet they claim to have seen this. And there's something extra here that you don't get in the Christian tradition, which is that it's kind of a reverse Paul. People often say, well, Paul used to persecute Christians, so why would he see this vision? This is the other way around, and I think therefore stronger. All 3 of these men were eventually excommunicated from the Mormon church. They fell out with Joseph Smith, and they were excommunicated from the church, yet until the day of their death, they asserted that they had seen the Book of Mormon. It's complicated, as Trent knows. Martin Harris is said to have sort of seen the plates with his spiritual eyes. So I'm attempting to draw an analogy here, right? So Martin Harris is one of the 3 witnesses, the other being Oliver Cowdery and David Whitman. And in 1838, Stephen Burnett claims that Martin Harris didn't see it with his natural eyes, but that it was a kind of vision. But then Martin Harris later said, look, as surely as I see my hands,
Mm.
I saw the golden plates. What I want to point out is that there are analogs here, which is that you've got this sort of claim of group appearances, which seem a little bit strange. You've got this kind of reason why maybe they wouldn't want to make this claim. And then you've got this slight debate over, well, was it physical? Was it spiritual? We're not entirely sure.
Yeah.
People often talk about the persecution of the apostles. So when I bring up the Mormon church, people say, oh yeah, but you don't understand that Christians were persecuted. They were put to death by Nero and Diocletian. And I'm like, have you looked into Mormon history? Do you not know that in the lifetimes of these witnesses and other witnesses to Mormon miracles, Mormons were persecuted by the United States of America? There was the Mormon Extermination Act in Missouri.
This is so okay. We're getting away from the original. I want to pause to make some few points that Alex says, and it could have even hit harder, but he did really good, and he's under pressure, time restraints, all that. He's about to get into a real situation where Mormons were actually persecuted by the state. Christians, if they were Mormons, would put this under their belt and say, "Oh, we were persecuted for the truth." They didn't recant. They stayed Mormons, and they're under extreme persecution to where there was an actual scene. I did a series on Mormonism very early on in MythVision, like a whole 20, 30 episodes of like hour long. We went through this, and I can't remember how many people died, but there was an actual, like, even children were shot and killed by people in the state that were attacking the Mormons, and they were forced out of the state under like threat of their lives. Mormons still remain Mormons, believing, and finally end up in Nauvoo. So, okay, a couple things. Hyrum Smith died, right? His brother died with Joseph in Carthage jail on June 27th, 1844. He was a witness to the golden plates. He was killed by a mob. By the apologist's own logic, this is a witness dying for what he saw. The way that Christian apologists will say, well, they wouldn't have died. They died for believing in Jesus. You hear this all the time. And I'm like, did they really, though? Did they just die as Christians? And who knows what the reason might be? Or did they die because they believed? Well, by the same logic, you could say Hyrum Smith died for what he saw, for his witnessing of the golden plates and his belief that Joseph Smith was the prophet who actually did these things. I feel like a lot gets snuck in when you're listening to apologists, whether it's Sean McDowell, others, who still make this argument that they died for their belief in the faith. You got to get into the details and go, what's the source say? Why exactly did they die? Like, if Paul really did go to Rome and get beheaded, did he get to Rome and they said, listen, just stop saying Jesus rose from the dead and we won't cut your head off? And he goes, I can't, because he rose from the dead. Up, shing, head go off. Is that what happened? Or is it the guy was breaking laws and he requested Nero, and come to find out, if you go to like some of the other traditions, he was supposedly talking some of these rich men's wives into not sleeping with their husbands anymore because he has this ascetic kind of view. And of course, if you take the apocalyptic route, maybe he's saying, hey, the end is about to happen. Stop giving into the flesh. But either way, if you take the ascetic route and you say, hey, he's telling women to not sleep with their husbands because that's fleshy stuff, and you want to be as ready for the Lord and the kingdom of God and all of that, and they're not sleeping with their husbands, and their husband goes, why aren't you wanting to lay with me? And they go, well, this guy, Paul, he told me this, and then they get himself killed. And then Christians go, oh, martyr Paul. Paul, what a martyr. And you go, well, dude, he was telling women not to sleep with their husbands, or it was like bad. It was not good. It was against doing the right thing according to the kingdom of God or something. Well, in the group, if you're drinking the Kool-Aid, you'd look at him as a martyr. Someone like me is going to go, no, he was very disruptive to the social order of things, and it caused him to get him in trouble. Now, should he have been killed for it? Well, no. We look at today and we go, our laws would be completely different than their laws and how they behave, and obviously we can anachronistically judge them. But I feel like that happens all the time. And what is being nailed here by Alex is there's persecution, and they're being persecuted for being Mormons who are trying to get other people to become Mormons, and the people in the state are not having it. Back to the original thing, though, too. So his brother's willing to die for that. Hiram Smith's death has to count the same way. The Mormon Extermination Order of 1838 he just brought up, where the Missouri governor Lilburn Boggs signed an executive order saying Mormons must be exterminated or driven from the state if necessary for the public peace. This is state-sanctioned violence against Mormons specifically because they were Mormons. And I didn't realize it was so vivid. Documented in real newspapers at the time. If the apostles were persecuted is evidence for Christianity, the early Mormons were persecuted has to be evidence for Mormonism by the same standard. And then David Whitmer's 1887 address. Whitmer was one of the 3 witnesses to the Golden Plates. He was excommunicated. He spent the rest of his life attacking Joseph Smith as a fallen prophet. And in 1887, he published an address to all believers in Christ where he defended the original vision while denouncing the church Smith built. So when he said reverse Paul, this guy is doing the opposite of Paul. You would think he left and went, no, I lied. He made me lie. No, he still claims the vision is literally true while hating or seemingly despising this prophet. And who knows? He might have had legit reasons. I mean, Joseph Smith was doing some pretty wild stuff at the end of his run with all these wives and all. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff he was doing that was just not going well. Anyway, yeah, someone who has nothing to gain and everything to lose, they say, still maintaining the testimony decades later. Trent's own standard for Paul should require him to take Whitmer's testimony seriously. But he won't. You know, he has a dogma. He has his own faith, you know.
Which literally called for the extermination and expulsion of Mormons. They were chased out of basically every state that they went into. In other words, I'd like to know how we explain that. There's then the 8 witnesses who don't witness the angel, but they do witness the golden plates. 8 of them who, again, 3 of those guys also lose touch with the Mormon church, fall out with Joseph Smith and get excommunicated, but still attest that that's what they saw. More to the point, though, there's this extraordinary event which I found when I was researching the history of the Mormon church a while ago, which is a transfiguration event. It's absolutely extraordinary. So in 1844, I'm sure Trent will be familiar with this. In 1844, there was something of a succession crisis, right? Joseph Smith had died and they didn't know who was going to be the next leader. So they called a conference in August, on the 8th of August. Brigham Young is one of the speakers. Now, we know from Brigham Young's later diaries that he says that there were thousands of people present. He says there were thousands of people at this conference. So let's say there were at least a few hundred. And amazingly, George Cannon writes in 1870, which is just 26 years later, that Brigham Young, while speaking, for vying for the leadership, transfigures into the image and likeness and voice of Joseph Smith. He says, who that was present on that occasion can ever forget the impression it made upon them? If Joseph had risen from the dead and spoken in their hearing, the effect could not have been more startling than it was to many present at that meeting. So we've got this report of probably hundreds of people seeing quite a miraculous event. Now, you could say, well, that report comes 26 years later. Okay. And how much later were Paul's reports?
Dude, Alex is good at this. Alex is really good at this. This guy is skilled with his rhetoric. I tell you, real quick, Solera Knight in the house. Solera, love you, man. 2 Timothy 4, they turn away from truth for myths. Yeah, and even 2 Peter 1, talking about we did not believe in cleverly devised myths, brethren, but we were eyewitnesses of his majesty on the holy mountain, right? Did you see? I don't know. You probably saw it, Solera. I did a video where it talks about how the Gospels are patching together Hebrew Bible to invent narratives. And this very narrative in 2 Peter, not this exact specific here in 2 Timothy 4, because I don't think 2 Timothy 4 gets into those details. Let me pull it up real quick here. 2 Timothy 4. 2 Timothy. I had to refresh the screen. 2 Timothy 4. All right. And did you give me the specific verse? You didn't. Okay, I'll find it. Okay. And let me go to verse 3 says, "For the time is coming when people will not put up with sound teaching, but having their ears tickled, they will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own desires, and will turn away from listening to the truth and wander away to myths. As for you, be sober in everything, endure suffering, do the work of an evangelist, carry out your ministry fully. As for me, I'm already being poured out as a libation, and the time of my departure has come. I fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith." And he goes on and on. So this one's not as explicit as like second Peter would be. Second Peter is much more, I'd say, nail on the head here. Second Peter 1, cleverly. Is it cleverly? Yeah. "So for we did not follow cleverly devised myths when we made known to you the power and coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, but we had been eyewitnesses of his majesty." Now, almost every serious scholar thinks this is not Peter, that this is a later author, 2nd century forger in the name of Peter. "For he received honor and glory from God the Father when that voice was conveyed to him by the majestic glory, saying, 'This is my son, my beloved, with whom I'm well pleased.' We ourselves heard this voice come from heaven while we were with him on the holy mountain." That is a patchwork of ancient Hebrew Bible texts. That narrative that we find in the Gospels that 2 Peter is trying to echo is itself a literary composite. It is a myth, but we did not believe cleverly devised myths. Yet the very text they're quoting is a patching of Old Testament text. Does that mean there's not a memory behind it? I can't prove there wasn't a memory, but I can show you the literary composition of the Gospels in their development using Hebrew scriptures and why that would be story. It's a story built by Old Testament text, which means 2 Peter claiming to be an eyewitness of an event that is built by Old Testament text. Hard to believe. Thank you so much, Solara.
Later with the gospel reports. Also note that in 1857, which is just 13 years after this event, after the Transfiguration, you have Albert Carrington's experience recorded, where Carrington says that, well, Brigham Young recounts Albert Carrington's experience and says that Carrington says that people could not tell him from Joseph Smith and could not see anyone but Joseph speaking. What you'll notice is that there's still this evidence that there's some kind of transfigurative event, but much less detailed, but much more close to the source. In 1869, 25 years later, so somewhere in the middle, Orson Hyde, who was an early Mormon leader, confirms the event, saying it was the voice of Joseph, and there were the features, gestures, and even the stature of Joseph. So what we have are three independent, in one case, eyewitness account, because Orson Hyde was actually speaking on the same day at the conference, eyewitness accounts of a transfiguration.
dude, he's cooking. He's cooking. Oh my goodness. Real quick, I saw a good comment from one of our commenters here. Check out section 132, Doctrines and Covenants of the LDS. He writes to his wife as God, "Emma Smith, you must let him have multiple wives. Thus say the Lord." It's hilarious. I have read this, Ivy, Ann, and great comment. I know exactly what you're talking about. I did a video with my buddy back in the day, Gary Stone, who, by the way, is, let me pull myself full screen before we continue. Gary is a descendant of Hiram. No, not Hiram. The scribe of Joseph Smith. Who's the scribe? That's his great-great-granddad. Anyway, I interviewed Gary and we read these. And what happened that day was the scribe, Hiram, and Joseph are all three in a room. And all of a sudden, Joseph gets the God is speaking through Joseph because he has these secret marriages, these plural wives. He has all these wives. And what does he do? He ends up speaking and saying, write this down. Thus saith the Lord. He quotes Abraham, all these Bible characters with all these different wives. They have many wives, right? And he's telling Emma that she better get her shit straight, even threatening her with like death or punishment and fire and things like that. I can't remember all the details, but Doctrines and Covenants 132, it is so obviously a man who's trying to put the fear of God that he made up into his wife to get on board. And once he thought, oh, this is fine, perfect, this is from God, let me go tell Emma, Gary told me that when he brought the paperwork to Emma to have her read the threats of God, telling her she better get in line, she said, well, if you get wives, I get husbands. And it pissed him off. she was like, if you're going to have wives, I'm going to have many husbands. And there are people who have suggested that she did have other lovers. So there was like a huge orgy thing going on, it seems, in the ancient Mormon church. Thanks for that comment, Ivy.
Of Brigham Young in front of hundreds of witnesses, many of whom, in the words of George Cannon, he says, who was present on that occasion that could ever forget this? In other words, if you're in any doubt about this, you could go and ask the witnesses who were there. Now, shelve that for a moment and think about how people talk about things like Trent's already mentioned the appearances that Paul recounts in 1 Corinthians 15. Paul says that Jesus appeared to Peter, which is strange because we don't get that narrated in the gospel stories, even though that seems to be the first and most important. But I mean, most pressingly, Paul says that Jesus appears to 500 people, as above 500 people, probably more than possibly above in a visionary experience. That's something else. And people say, look, this is our only source. But, you know, Paul says some of these people are still alive. So if you're in any doubt, you could just go and ask them. And I would say, well, why didn't people go and ask about the Mormon transfiguration experiences? Perhaps because if you read George Q. Cannon's account, it's not clear who these people are. I mean, people often say this. They say, you know, those 500 people, some of them were still alive, so you could have gone and checked. How? You're just going to like walk to Jerusalem, which has tens of thousands of people at minimum in it, and just start asking around and see if anyone's seen the risen Christ? How many no's would it take before you said, okay, maybe not then? In other words, I have no idea why Paul says that Jesus appeared to 500 people. We don't know that Paul was there. He probably wasn't. He says he's passing down something that was passed on to him, which says that it's an early creed. But we're not quite sure where that creed ends because Paul inserts himself at the end of it. But we don't know where he's heard it from. We don't know who these 500 people are. We don't know why they were gathered. We don't know
The other thing is, I have to just, and this is my own personal thing. I love everything Alex is saying. I'd take it one step further and just ask. It'd be like, if Paul is getting internal revelation, as he claims in Galatians 1, I got this from no man. I got this directly from the Lord. What if Paul's the one suggesting or saying these things? And they aren't, it's not really an early creed. Just saying, what if Paul invents these things? 1 Corinthians 11 talks about the night he was handed over. Many scholars have taken the approach of saying, well, he probably heard this from Peter or from one of the apostles that were there with Jesus. However, people like Robyn, Faith Walsh, and others think this is an internal apocalypse that's being revealed to Paul. He didn't get this as a testimony handed to him by the disciples. This is something that he is having a visionary experience, that on the night the Lord was handed over, that he gave drink and whatnot, and that's how he received this message. So there may be other ways to even read this, is all I'm saying. And I have one more I have to throw out there. What if Paul's not telling the truth? What if Paul is motivated? Like, all right, if you listen to an apologist on TV preaching, and if you're a certain Christian, you're hearing one you don't like, you might think that guy's a fraudster. Look at Mike Winger, right? He spent like the last year really highly focused on charismatic preachers and all these other preachers, and he calls them liars. He's calling them like frauds. They're manipulative. They're lying. They're in it for money. All of these same apologists do not do the same self-critical thought about Paul. And is Paul in it for the money? Is Paul potentially motivated under the means of some kind of money? He says he's not. Oh, well, just ask those charismatic preachers. Are you in this for the money? Are you lying? No, I'm not. I'm not in it for the money. But truth is, he's constantly looking for money from the churches that he's going to. Read 1 Corinthians. You will see. Why is that not an option that's taken more seriously? Paul has motivated reasoning. I don't know why that's not taken more seriously. Anyway, throwing it out there on the table.
How many of them believed? We don't know if any of them recounted. We don't know anything about this kind of event. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying that compared to something like the events of the Transfiguration of Brigham Young, from someone like outside of all of this who has no vested interest here, really, I see them as equally plausible, perhaps more plausible in the case of Mormonism, because that happened in the 1800s. And we have at least one eyewitness account that says that he saw it directly. We don't have anything like that for the Gospels. The only eyewitness account that we have for the resurrection of Jesus, the only one, is Paul, who did not see a bodily resurrected Christ, but saw a flash in the sky and heard a voice, which is not the same kind of thing.
Trent, I'd love to hear your response to two things.
So there's a lot there, right? A lot to unpack. I really feel like it's worth letting Trent answer as much of that as he can and not try to interrupt as much as I can, feel free to via super chat, comments, whatever. But yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. And I agree with him that Paul's mentioning here is not the same thing that we hear later in the Gospels with these post-mortem appearances and whatnot. Anyway.
There. The first being this broader comparison with Mormonism, and secondly, this idea that Paul didn't believe in a physical resurrection.
Sure. So let me start with Paul. I would say that Paul, being a Pharisee, was firmly committed to the idea that resurrection is bodily. When we see in his letters, he is dealing with the Corinthians. He's dealing actually with skeptical people. People at that time didn't necessarily believe everything that was pitched to them. So in 1 Corinthians 15, he's dealing with people who can't even believe there's going to be a bodily resurrection, or what is that going to be like? That I think many people, when they hear about this, they think, oh, I'm going to be a zombie. Like the skeleton gets out of the ground and the flesh is drooping off of it. Like who wants to have that? Paul is saying, no, you're not going to be that, but you're not going to be just a disembodied spirit either. In his letter to the Corinthians, he's very clear when he says that we do not, he compares being a disembodied spirit to being naked without clothes or naked outside of a tent, a condition you don't want to be in. Rather, what he says, like in Philippians 3:21, Paul says that God will change our lowly bodies to conform to his glorious physical body. So he often talks about...
Hold up. Philippians 3:21. I've got to fact check him on this. Oh, Philemon, nope, wrong one. Philippians. Here we go. Philippians 3. And here we go. I'm going to share my screen. I want to actually fact check him on this here. Philippians 3:21. This is crossbible.com. My buddy Steven has built this from the ground up. Brilliant guy, great friend. Okay. He will transform the body of our humiliation, that is to be conformed to the body of his glory. So what did he say? He said to the physical body, right? He said something about the physical body. I don't see any physical body. I see he will transform the body of our humiliation, that it may be conformed to the body of his glory by the power that he also enables him to make all things subject to himself. I mean, we could pull up the Greek, right, and actually look there and see if it talks about physical, but I don't think you're going to find physical anywhere in this. Huh. That is strange. All right, hold on. Let me go back to seeing what he said to make sure, because it doesn't say physical. Maybe it's a slip. Let me go. Is it 640, 631? There we go.
Ian. Rather, what he says, like in Philippians 3:21, Paul says that God will change our lowly bodies to conform to his glorious physical body.
So it doesn't say physical. It just says he will transform the body of our humiliation, that it may be conformed to the body of his glory. The body. So it's talking about bodies, but it's not talking about physical. Let's continue.
So he often talks about not being clothed in immortality, having a physical body that is not limited by the physics of this universe. So, for example, like you don't have to be a ghostly presence to walk through walls. Technically speaking, in a physical body, you're mostly empty space. If you think about the space between atoms and electrons, if you had omnipotent control over now you can't walk through solid substances because of nuclear force. But if you had a bit more control over the universe, you could pass solid objects through one another through a kind of fate.
Dude, this is so anachronistic. Like the ancients weren't thinking they were definitely thinking in their own scientific way, but it's nothing like what modern thinkers are thinking. So like, I think this is doing a disservice for what these ancient texts are and trying to situate Paul's thinking in a Middle Platonist mindset, how they philosophically were thinking about the body, pneuma, all of these things.
Amazing, if you will. So I think those descriptions showing that Jesus has a physical body, like eating fish, showing I'm not a ghost, I'm not a spirit. I am the inauguration of the resurrection, which was unheard of for Jews at that time before the end of the world. That's striking that they proclaim Jesus rose, not just that he was in heaven, not just that he was in Abraham's bosom, that he rose. The reference to Jesus, when Paul says flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom, he uses that as a Semitism, a Jewish way of speaking about the world. Worldly things that are merely material cannot inherit the kingdom. You have to be spiritual. So we often think of spiritual like a substance, but spiritual also means an orientation. Like if I say the Bible's a spiritual book, it's not going to pass through you if I throw it at you. So I would say that when it comes to Paul, I think we have what manifests the movement.
Alex's light bulbs went off for a second there. I have my own thoughts, but let's see if I don't want him to shift topics because I do want to address what he said there, but let's see.
Christianity is this radical proclamation of the resurrection that I would say makes the most sense with an encounter with the risen Jesus that could be cross-checked by seeing, for example, that his tomb is empty. Like if I had a friend, in fact, actually, I gave a eulogy once for a friend who died when she was 19 years old. I gave a eulogy at the funeral. That night, I had a dream. She sat at the foot of my bed and we talked, and it felt really, really real. But I woke up and realized, okay, that's just a vision. And in the New Testament, they talk about visions, a vision in the night. They know the difference between visions and seeing someone. But if I saw that in broad daylight, I go and dig up her casket, and if it's empty, I would have had questions. Now, when it comes to Mormonism, I appreciate Alex getting into this. I knew a little while ago, Alex, I feel like the Mormons were like, Alex is almost here. He's ready to be Mormon.
You have a lot of that.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
Okay. So hold on.
I saw a bit of that, and I was like, wow.
So he's getting into Mormonism, right? Before we have to address his point about the resurrection, because it is hard for them to keep track on the spot of everything the last person might have said, and that's difficult. So Trent says, so Paul was a Pharisee, firmly committed to bodily resurrection. He cites Philippians 3:21, we read, which he renders as God will change our lowly bodies to conform to his glorious physical body. He says the Greek word soma refers to a physical body with a corporeal form. He explains 1 Corinthians 15:50, flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, as a Semitism for worldly things, not a substance claim. And I saw the light bulbs go off in Alex's mind. I'm not sure if he picked up on that and thought, Semitism sounds like he's like got an excuse here for maybe a way of trying to justify flesh and blood, because I think that Trent Horn thinks Jesus rose flesh and blood, bodily, physically flesh and blood, and he's in that form today, the hypostatic union, that he literally is today the same body he was then. I mean, I don't want to straw man, but anyway, this is what he said, right? And he extends this to the idea that a glorified physical body could pass through walls because most of physical matter is empty space at the atomic level. So the Greek says soma, and I'm probably going to butcher this, tes doxizato, the body of his glory. There's no word for physical in the verse. Trent slipped it in. The verse contrasts soma tapinosis, the body of humiliation, with the body of glory. It's a two-state contrast, not a same matter, better appearance claim. Anyone with a Greek New Testament can check this. Pull up, you could literally go and pull up like an interlinear Greek, especially someone who knows Greek would be able to look at this and go, oh, okay, I see what's going on. Now, the scholar I brought up earlier, Troels Imberg Peterson, I've got his book right here. Let me show you something he has to say about this. Here we go. Let me pull this up and share my screen. There we go. So this here, Cosmology and Self in the Apostle Paul, the material spirit. Here's what he says, right? And he's bringing up, I could go and show you the Corinthian body in Del B. Martin, what he has to say about this, but let's go to page 17, the turn of 16 into 17, what he has to say about this issue. Almost there. Stoic understanding of 1 Corinthians 15. So finally, there's a third front that was articulated in 1995 with gusto by Del Martin to the effect that the crucial passage of 1 Corinthians 15, 35 to 49 shows that Paul probably had a material understanding of the pneuma like most other people in the ancient world, not least philosophers. Thus, at the eschaton, Christians will have bodies without flesh, blood, or soul, composed solely of pneumatic substance, light, airy, luminous bodies. And that's from Del Martin's book, of course. This, as we shall see, is quite right. And Martin's account in the major part of his chapter on 1 Corinthians 15 of the contextual background of Paul's argument in 15:35 to 49 is masterly in a mine of information. Then he goes on to be critical about the apocalyptic nature and stuff that goes back and forth. But this idea that there's something there, because we imagine spirit, we think of spirit as like invisible and there's nothing there. This is a later anachronistic understanding. They saw spirit as a real substance, as a thing. We don't like we have things, but you can see these things. In those cases, you can't see it necessarily, but you might if it's bright light. Because in 1 Corinthians 15, let me show you the text again. If we could pull it up. Let's go to 1 Corinthians 15. Paul describes these bodies, and when he does, he describes them in heavenly form. All things in subjugation. I die every day. Animals of Ephesus, do not be deceived. Sober up. Okay, the resurrection body. Okay, I say this to your shame, the resurrection body, but someone will ask, how are the dead raised? With what kind of body do they come? Fool, what you sow does not come to life unless it dies. And as for what you sow, you do not sow the body that is to be, but a bare seed, perhaps of wheat or of some other grain. But God gives it a body as he has chosen, and to each kind of seed its own body. Not all flesh is alike, but there is one flesh for humans, another for animals, another for birds, another for fish. And there are both heavenly bodies and earthly bodies, but the glory of the heavenly is one thing, and that of the earthly is another. There is one glory of the sun, another glory of the moon, another glory of the stars. Indeed, stars differ from star in glory. So it is with the resurrection of the dead. Notice he contrasts the earthly from the heavenly. The bodies of earthly beings, fish, birds, animals, humans, from bodies that are in heaven, stars, moon, etc., right? The sun. He's got a contrast going on. He's working with a dichotomy here between two types of things. So it is with the resurrection of the dead. What is sown is perishable, fleshly, human, like fish, animals, etc., humans. What is raised is imperishable. It is like heavenly bodies. It's sown in dishonor. It's raised in glory. It is sown in weakness. It's raised in power. It's sown a physical body. It's raised a spiritual body. If there is a physical body, there's also a spiritual body. Thus it is written, the first man, Adam, became a living being. The last Adam became a life-giving spirit. But it's not the spirit that is first, but the physical and then the spiritual. The first man was from the earth, made of dust. The second man is from heaven. Again, there's that contrast. So when you hear this appearance to Paul being a bright light, it's trying to give you this kind of imagery that the second Adam is from heaven. It is this, like the sun, like the stars, bright pneumatic body, which is why he didn't just see a flesh and blood 5'6" Jesus appear to him on the road and go, hey, why do you persecute me? And he goes, who are you? I'm Jesus, the guy you've been persecuting. All these people, they're in me. No, he saw a blinding bright white light or bright light that blinded him. That is in line with the cosmology that they have, or their theology that they have, for a, I'll say, deified being that is in heaven. Okay, that's in line with their cosmology. All right, now let's get back to the movie. Get your popcorn. Here we go.
Wow, if you knew Alex's take on things like young Earth creationism, why don't you get Alex's take on the Mormon view of history? I think he's going to be much more skeptical of that. Mm-hmm. I think this is important, though. That's why I brought up about Mary and Zaytoun. I think, and I don't want to drone on and on. I'll get to this, but there's a lot to respond to. But I think, Alex, you'd be sensitive. Many skeptics, when they look at Christians, are probably saying, let's make sure we're on the same page here. Look, if you're going to follow evidence, that's all fine and dandy. But I want to see that you are following it consistently.
Yes.
If you're carving out special exceptions for what you believe, and then you're dismissive of all the other stuff, well, now you see where I'm coming from. So I think that's where that's the challenge in defense. I think that's, at least I'm seeing that more now. The challenge is, all right, let's follow your standards of evidence that will only show Jesus' resurrection and Christian miracles, but not necessarily non-Christian things.
Yes.
Although I will. So is that a fair summary of that?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay. So my reply then, and I think this is getting back to what I said earlier about like evangelical apologists that have frequently engaged in this, or other Christians. There are some Christians who hold to a view that's called, in Christian theology, is a debate between cessationism and continuationism. Do divine charisms, do miracles happen after the apostolic age?
Yep.
And there are some Christians who say, no, that's all frauds. The miracles ended with the death of the apostles. And then there are more Pentecostal Christians who say, well, no, God still performs miracles. And as a Catholic, we're certainly...
By the way, I think Wes Huff fits into that camp a little. The way he he described speaking in tongues as, is only a phenomena of known languages in the first century. But of course, now we have the word, which means you don't need to speak in tongues. That gift has ceased to be a thing. It was only like an initial thing, and there was no need for it beyond that. Obviously, I've been down that path. I went through that Protestant kind of approach as well. When that which is perfect has come, the word of God is perfect, and the canon, then we don't need to do this. This will cease, but love will be eternal. I think that's where Wes Huff would go. I would just add to this to say, like, if I was a Christian, I would want to extend it, because there were many uncharted territories in the world, and it seems that speaking in tongues was for non-believers. If I'm not mistaken, let me double check this here. The exact source. Does Paul's letters, not the book of Acts, Paul's letters say that speaking in tongues, which is, by the way, the language of angels, for non-believers, because they're supposed to be interpreters as well. But notice, like, you would think it's pretty odd. So yeah, Paul says something very close to that. 1 Corinthians 14:22. Tongues then are a sign not for believers, but for unbelievers, while prophecy is not for unbelievers, but for believers. So I don't know how, like, if you walked into a church and they were speaking Spanish, like, how that would be, I don't know, miraculous to you. They're just speaking another language, and then another person comes in who knows English and Spanish and says, hey, this is what he said. And that's supposed to be like some fantastic, miraculous thing. But then when you compare it to things like the Sibyl, right? The known prophetess that was there, the oracle at Delphi and stuff, they also chanted and spoke in glossolalia. They spoke in languages, divine tongues, so to speak, that no one understood what they were saying. And I do think there's some overlap with that stuff, especially in the Mediterranean world. Anyway, little tangent.
Continuationists, we have saints that have been proclaimed to do all kinds of different miracles, and I would say with pretty good evidence behind several of them. So we would say, well, no, there's no reason to shut that off. So I think that some people who defend the resurrection, they're very, very skeptical of paranormal or post-apostolic miracles when they shouldn't be. Now, I don't believe all of them. I think some have bad evidence for them or insufficient evidence. Likewise, when it comes to non-Christian religions, I think that God could perform miracles or signs or wonders among non-Christians, and that could still be harmonious with Christian theology.
Yes,
because God loves everybody. So if a Buddhist prays in the middle of a flood to be saved, God might miraculously save her because he loves that person. He loves her.
But what if it leads them? Like, what if that prayer leads the Buddhist to be even more staunch Buddhist? Like a Muslim prays, and then it confirms to them that Muhammad is it, and it's like, this just made them even more convinced that it was. I'm just making an analogy. But then what do you do with this? Like the example I gave of the Ganesha, I think it's Ganesha drinking milk miracle, where all these people saw this phenomenon. Would he just go with the naturalist scientific investigation and say, oh yeah, it's this, I always mess this up. I'm not sure how you properly pronounce it. Capillary action. Is that how you say it? Capillary? How do you pronounce that? I want to find out how to pronounce this. I'm going to look this up real quick here. I hate that I get things wrong. So yeah, capillary. So it's capillary action of absorbing the fluids through the statue. Or would he say it's demons and millions of people were duped? If that many people are actually being falsely led down that kind of path, I'm just thinking to myself, like, as humans, right, why we would be a lot more cautious in believing or buying the narratives that are being peddled or pushed out there to people. I'm very cautious about that. I don't know if it's just because we have a completely different framework, and I'm factoring in things that they're not, so that they believe certain things that I don't. I don't know. I don't know what psychology would be behind it, but yeah, I always try to figure out how to get these names pronounced properly. Thank you for the compliment there, Analytical Troy. I don't do the best. Sometimes I'll like literally say, like, I used to say Cambridge, but yeah, he's from Cambridge University. Someone's like, just recently was like, it's Cambridge, Cambridge, and I'm like, oh snap. So like, I'm now trying to get my pronunciation proper. All right, let's continue. I just wanted to throw that back there. What if God's really behind the scenes doing these things, and he does heal or protect the Buddhist, but then the Buddhist just becomes even more devotional toward Buddha? What then? Are they still going to go to hell if they don't believe in Jesus? I mean, why couldn't God do the same thing for humans, knowing how fickle and how ignorant we are as ants on this planet, animals that evolved here? Why couldn't he just go, all of you don't really know what you're doing. You didn't sign up for this. You had no clue what you were getting yourselves into. And I'm just going to love all you, and you're all good. And we're going to have this great place we're going to go to when we're all dead. No, instead you have this whole theology of punishment and death. And it's like, really? Anyway.
Without necessarily endorsing the truth of Buddhism. The problem I think that you might raise is you might say, yes, that's all fine and dandy, all fine and good. But what about these things that appear to be miracles that, right, that appear to endorse a competing theology? Yeah. So when I would look at miracle claims for a competing theology, there's two options here. One, I could say that there's a natural explanation that we're overlooking. Two, there could be a supernatural, there could be a supernatural malevolent explanation, that's demonically inspired. Now, one might say that's kind of, are you going to say everything that's not you is a demon? That's kind of a cop-out. No, I think that we can apply tests to see, is the message driving people away from, true theology about Jesus? Now, with Mormonism, I'm kind of on the fence about this one, Alex. It could be, I think there are very compelling natural explanations for many of the things you brought up. And I think some of them, there could be demonic explanations, or it could be both.
Dude, okay, real quick. Let me get this super chat here real fast. Matthew, love you, man. Thank you so much. You kind of just explained my universalist view. I've said it before. I'll say it again, Matthew. Then I want to address what's going on with Trent here. If I ever came back, which I don't see how, but who knows? If I did, you just never know. Like, if I were trying to make sense of the world and my God was love, for me, I'm only speaking for me. Now, you might rationalize your theology some other way. I'm going full screen for this. If my God was love and wanted everyone to be saved, I hate to break it to you, everyone will be saved. If God wants something, it's going to happen. That's how I would reason through it. I wouldn't say he wants everyone to be saved, but damn it, there are a lot of people he's cooking. And he made a place so they could go there to be punished too, along with the devil and his angels. It ain't going to work for me. I would need, I would say, no, sorry, everyone's going to be redeemed at some point. God will save everyone. That would be my mindset, just keeping it real. So Matthew, I think it's a much nicer theology at the end of the day. And I get why hell exists. I got a documentary coming out on that. It's going to be pretty exhaustive on all sorts of stuff. Psychologically, just injustice in the world, natural phenomena from lava and sulfur and volcanic activities to other mythologies also that play a significant role. So there's all sorts of stuff that's coming. Okay, now back to what Trent just said. It seems like everything that was launched back to Trent from Alex comes down to two explanations that Trent seems to be willing or wanting to go down. That is, I can explain this naturally, which that's what I typically do. I typically want to explain these things through a natural means. If I don't know the answer, or I'm not sure, I'll still say I think there probably is a natural explanation. I just don't know it. So call it the natural explanation of the gaps argument, because almost in every case, it ends up getting filled through a naturalist explanation that we get to observe, test, or whatever, when we are able to fill that gap. It doesn't, the God of the gaps argument usually gets smaller the more we learn. And that's what I'm saying, the opposite. I'm saying the natural of the gaps argument. The other thing is he says demonic or devil or satanic or evil, malevolent explanation. And that goes back to the original apologist, people like Justin Martyr and others who tried to say the devils or demons long ago imitated Christ in, their various stories, the different myths that we now read about. And that's why they look so much like Jesus. A virgin births of Perseus and Dionysus being ripped into pieces, shredded into pieces, him resurrecting, the Caesars ascending on a pyre, having an apotheosis, the Logos, Hermes, and Jesus. Things like that. He saw the parallels and thought, oh, demons made these parallels. Notice that's the only two. And a Mormon would just say, no, it's because this is the messenger. And he would do the same thing for a Christian, an approved, stamped miracle. He would say, nope, that's divine. Whether it's Zatan, I'm not sure if that's how you properly pronounce the Fatima and the various other Marian apparitions. He'd probably say, nope, that's divine. While Mormons will say, this is divine. He wants to hunt natural explanations with us. So he wants to join the camp. Hey, come on, Trent. Hey, come on. Hey, Alex O'Connor, together. We're going to naturally look at how we can explain this thing. But as soon as you bring up like the Marian ones, he's like, oh, no. Nope. Stop. This one's divine. You know what I'm saying? That's my observation.
Maybe it started as a hoax and the devil kind of runs with it, like in the case you gave. The case you gave, though, about the transfiguration, I mean, it sounds a lot like people could be, really, really enthralled with a religious speaker at an event. They're at essentially a rally type atmosphere where you're already religiously primed for a speaker. And they're talking about how, oh, you sound just like him. It's like I have Sean McDowell here, and maybe he could give a talk at a evangelical church, and they're like, my goodness, Sean, I saw your dad Josh on stage when you were talking. It was just like him. And it's like, well, he's a lot like Josh. That's probably true. And then, it kind of, that sounds a little bit different than me than saying, yeah, my rabbi that was crucified 3 days ago and put in a tomb, we saw him. He was eating. He appeared to different groups of people. So that example I don't think is as compelling to me. The other examples, I think there's really way more disanalogous elements between the resurrection claim and Mormonism. I could briefly run through them. We can unpack. Like I said, I don't want to go too on, but you threw a lot out there. Mm-hmm. So a few elements there. One, the people who saw the golden plates, that doesn't do much for me. They could have been natural artifacts. Yep. In 1843, there were people who created a hoax set of plates called the Kinderhook plates. Yes. That Joseph went to engage and read. So those could have been natural artifacts. It could have been hoaxes. I'm not as impressed by that. The three witnesses who saw the angel, when you look through, there's a lot of discrepancies. It seems like they had to go, and Joseph led them out there. Remember, he's already trying to convince them of this. Mm-hmm. Whereas with the apostles, all of them are starting with a blank slate. Jesus is dead. What do we do? Joseph is trying to convince these two people. One of them, Martin Harris, who is financially backing this endeavor. And so has some skin in the game on this, of this. And so they're praying a lot in order to see something. I think that's very different. When it comes to persecution, I'll leave on this point. I agree with you. People are willing to take risks for rewards. So Joseph Smith took a lot of risks. And I think, though, from his perspective, there were rewards he was seeking. He became a political leader in Nauvoo. He planned to run for president. He acquired multiple brides, some of them being underage, as young as 14. So we had a television show in the U.S. 20 years ago called To Catch a Predator. And I saw in that show, men were willing to take many, many, many risks for underage girls. So I'm not as surprised that he's going. And then when Smith was arrested and put in the Carthage City jail, mm-hmm. he was not like a martyr led to the slaughter. He had a handgun smuggled into the jail, and when a gunfight broke out, he shot back. That's not quite what Jesus and the apostles did. So I grant you.
I don't know. Hold on. So I'd be really, really impressed if there was early evidence to show exactly what the early apostles actually did and how they got themselves killed and why. Again, I could show you a source where why Paul was killed was because, and this is like 90s to 100s, where they're suggesting Paul, I believe it's 90s or 100s, I could be wrong about the date, where they're suggesting that Paul was telling women in the faith in his cult to not sleep with their husbands. Now, I mean, you could read between the lines. You could say, no. Even if he was really being consistent and truthfully, like not doing anything with these women in the church, which a lot of cults have men do with women in the cults. If you read between the lines and compare it to other, it's not like they're writing down what they're doing. These modern cults that you can go watch on documentaries after documentary on Netflix, they're sleeping with these women left and right. They're not writing down they're sleeping with these women. You find that out in the social progress of actually learning about them and finding out through people who are explaining, he's sleeping with these 15 girls, like in the cult. They're not writing it down in their scripture. So you got to kind of wonder, is Paul doing that? If he's not, and he's not actually actively doing those things, and he's just teaching, stop sleeping with your husband, and then this husband's a powerful man, he gets himself killed. I mean, to Christians, it might go, that's a martyrdom scene. That's good on Paul. Paul did the right thing. We can mock that Joseph Smith had a weapon in jail, and he's like, I'm not going out without a fight. Okay. Therefore, to outsiders, he's not considered a martyr. Okay, you're justified in your observation. Insiders say you're not. Well, I can say the same thing about Paul or the other apostles, in my view. I don't think there are any early sources for these martyrdoms that describe those things that way. And even when you get to some, like you can go read, I've always brought this up. I believe, not Clement, Ignatius in his letter to the Romans is one of the most suicidal letters I've ever read. Nobody's forcing him to die. He wants to die. Let me show you. And I don't know if he actually wrote this. There's really good critical scholarship behind this. Letter to the Romans. Let me show you this. I've shown this several times to people, but it's worth you getting your eyes on it. Okay. Zooming in just a little bit. I don't want to overdo it, but he's writing to the Romans. Greetings. He's a prisoner. Okay. He's saying, guys, don't try to get me out. Okay. As a prisoner, I hope to see you, but he's like, please spare me. If you spare me, he's like, it's going to be difficult for me to attain to God if you spare me. He's complaining like, look, don't get me out of this pickle. I do not save me from martyrdom. Okay. I want to die. Pray that rather that I may attain to martyrdom. Allow me to fall prey to the wild beast. They had an option to get him out of this, to keep him from dying. It's a death cult. He wants to die. If you don't believe me, chapter 5, I desire to die. He tells them he wants to become the food of the wild beasts that are prepared before me. I pray they be found eager to rush upon me, which also I will entice to devour me quickly. He's going to make them want to kill him and not deal with me as with some who out of fear they have not touched. But if they be unwilling to assail me, this is the death by cop moment, I will compel them to do so. That's pretty telling. So if this mindset is the mindset of the apostles, the mindset of the early Christians who want themselves to die, believing somehow theologically this allows them to attain to God, you can call it martyrdom. If it makes you, makes it seem and sound better, sounds more like a death by cop kind of scenario to get where you want to go. That's what it sounds like.
There's going to be similarities in any religious claims, but for me, I think it's very disanalogous. And also for me, when it comes to Mormonism versus Christianity, I would say with Christianity, we don't have really any evidence that says, oh, we've got counterbalancing evidence that this contradicts what we know about the world. Most of our evidence is just, well, can we believe what they said about Jesus? Mm-hmm. We're not making, that's why, like, I'm not a young earth creationist, for example. because I think it contradicts what we know about the world from science. But the problem is, I think
I hate to pause, but I just want to throw it back at you. Is someone dead for 3 full days and then rising from the dead, literally dead? I'm not talking about near-death experience. I'm talking about dead experience for 3 days and then coming back. Does that not contradict what we know about the world? I don't know. You tell me.
Mormonism makes those kind of claims about ancient Israelites being the progenitors of Native Americans and a lot of other things that contradict what we know about the world. That sets the probability of it being true much lower than we have.
What about like Quirinius's worldwide tax that wasn't worldwide? What about, I mean, like there's historical blunders we can point to, contradictions among the material. I don't know where he's going with this. Maybe Alex is going to chime back because yeah, there's some goofy Mormon claims in my opinion, you know, the Native Americans and Jesus came over here and there was some submarine story or some wooden sub or something. There's a lot of goofy stuff you can find there, but it depends on how you want to look at this. Like there's a lot of other things I would say just aren't historical. They don't make sense, or there's contradictions and problems in the material in the New Testament.
Christianity.
Alex, one of the things that Trent brought up is the idea that Paul was a Pharisee, that the dominant conception of resurrection in the ancient world was a physical one. You know, people were expecting to get their flesh and bones back. So I wondered what you made of that objection.
Yeah, sure. I will answer that. I promise. I must take a moment to respond to what Trent said just then. But I do want to get back to the New Testament. I think that's very important. I don't want to talk about Mormonism all day. But I'm not just going to talk about Mormonism. I'm doing it to draw a comparison.
Yeah.
So specifically, a few things that Trent said that I pulled out. Firstly, he said that you got to remember that the people that Joseph took out to see the plates were kind of, you know, they were like expectations. They were sort of trying to make them believe it. Trent believes that Jesus predicted his own resurrection. And maybe the disciples didn't fully understand what was happening there. But the idea that this sort of comes out of the blue, I think, is not entirely true. He also said that Martin Harris, one of the first witnesses to the angel and the golden plates, was financially backing the project, and so would have a vested interest. Well, who was financially backing the ministry of Jesus?
Yeah.
We're told in the Gospels it was the women. It was Mary Magdalene, who is the first woman to see the risen Jesus, according to at least some of the narratives.
Not only them, but all of the churches that are buying the package that they're selling are participating in this massive help the poor in Jerusalem, I'll say, fundraiser, if you want to call it that Paul is trying to do. So there are people who've invested a lot of their money into this in the process. Does Paul have motivated reasons through power? This is another psychological thing I brought up before, is like, I told this story recently on an interview or as a live stream. It was a live stream. Maybe some of you saw it. I was invited. I'll give a quick story. We'll come back to the show, to the review of this debate. I was invited to give a eulogy at my wife's best friend's funeral because she died of an overdose of drug addiction. She died of fentanyl. And when I got there, I was supposed to read, I thought, a few paragraphs, and that was it. Like, hey, you know, about Elisa. When I got there, they called me Pastor Lambert. I'm running MythVision at the beginning of MythVision's career, like doing the show. I no longer believe these things. And I walk in the funeral home and they call me Pastor Lambert. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm nervous. And like, I'm more nervous than they realize. And I'm like walking and they tell me to go in the back and there's a whole family there and they're circled around wanting me to lead the prayer. I'm like, I haven't prayed in a while. I know how to ride a bicycle. So I start saying the prayer for the whole group and I'm nervous as hell. And they're all like, great prayer. And I'm just like, thank you. I can't even tell because I'm like freaking out. I can't believe this scenario. I didn't realize they wanted me to lead the whole funeral service. I thought I was just giving a eulogy real quick and that was it. So I walked into something I had no clue about, nervous, but the way that they treated me, you could see someone letting that get to their head because they look up to you as a spiritual authority. You're somebody very powerful in their eyes. You're someone they look up to, and you have a station in their minds that you are significantly more important than the average person. You're a spiritual advisor. You're a teacher. You're a whatever it might be in this arena of the movement. And I would not be shocked when people talk about they didn't have a motivated reason. The disciples didn't have a motivated reason to lie or steal the body, even though one of the Gospels hints that they stole the body. Well, one of the Gospels comes in and tries to make that not possible because you had actual guards at the tomb, so they couldn't have stole the body. But then they go to sleep under divine angelic presence, and Jesus comes out of the tomb. Of course, then they end up witnessing it. But then they are willing to be bribed out of it. It doesn't make sense to me. I'm sitting here thinking to myself, yes, they do have motivated reasoning. I know from experience, just from one experience of being at a funeral home, the way I got treated as a pastor when I wasn't one, that someone who went from, let's pretend they were in Galilee actually fishing and making their living catching fish, as the Gospels say, they're just fishermen. Then they went from fishermen to people handing them money as spiritual and powerful authorities in the cult. They become the cult leaders in the movement. So they went from fishing to make a living, which also became a pain in the ass once Lake Tiberias started getting taxed. So now they're getting taxed out of like crazy. They're making all this money and they're authorities now. Like they have plenty of psychological reasons to invent or roll with the punches and try to be creative and run with this stuff. And one more comment. I'm sorry I always bring this up, but you may not have watched this. So forgive me for those who watch all the time. If you haven't read Lucian of Samosata, The Life of Peregrinus Proteus, how this guy goes to commit, jumps on a pyre and dies and ascends to heaven. I'll just get right to the nutshell, the point that matters. Just get right to it. He's on his way home after this guy Peregrinus commits to the flames, and people are asking him, "Hey, is Peregrinus there? And can we go and see him at the spectacle? He says he's going to jump on the pyre to ascend to Mount Olympus, or to die in front of everybody." He says, "Yeah, well, he's already gone." And Lucian says he made up a story where he told these people that once Peregrinus jumped onto the fire and his body was committed to the flames, a phoenix or a falcon, either one, I think it's a falcon, but I could be wrong, ascends out of the fire in the voice of a human, screams away to Olympus I fare, like he's done with the earth and he's going to Olympus, Mount Olympus. And then they go, which direction did he go? And Lucian says he went west or east. He tells some this way and others that way. He said, I just felt like, BSing them. Like he kind of told one this and one that as he was on his way home, traveling on the road. Now, mind you, this is during the Olympic Games. So this is a massive event. It's like going to the Super Bowl, and then outside of the Super Bowl, there's a guy with a big ass fire burning, and he's like, I'm about to do the thing. There's going to be a huge audience of people who are interested in this massive, famous philosopher who's going to jump on the pyre because he's so devout and following his philosophy that he's ready to go to heaven. So next day he comes back, next day or two, there's an old man with a white beard full of confidence who swears, and he's with confidence saying to the crowds near where the fire was, people are picking up charcoal thinking it's a piece of Peregrinus's body to take with them as a relic. And he says, I saw Peregrinus ascend to Mount Olympus, and I saw him wearing white raiment in the 7 porticos and all this stuff. Lucian said that he made that up a day or two earlier. Lucian said he made that up. And this man swears that he saw Peregrinus ascend. 2 days later, a man is claiming he saw the thing. 2 days. Not decades later in a letter claiming through a tradition of a cult that wants to grow and wants your money. And the letters of Paul say that they want your money to feed the poor in Jerusalem and all this stuff. They're gathering goods from you all over the empire. Like at some point, if the name Mormonism was somehow what the New Testament was about, Christians would be all over that going, nope, that didn't happen. Nope, that's not. They had motives. But because they already are indoctrinated to believe this, I think, because I was there, they're already easily persuaded to keep, defending the thing that they already were believing to begin with. And I think the same can be said for Mormons. Like, I don't know a single Mormon apologist who would look at the evidence we are looking at and go, nah, bro, nah, are you kidding me? And they go, you're right. No, you're right. You've convinced me. No, they already believe it. They're defending it. Something else has got to give in their mind in order for them to finally let go. All right, back to the show.
So again, a direct narrative link there, I think. Also, the point about Joseph's death, yeah, like quite the shootout. I don't think that martyrs...
Ho. I missed the super chat. I'm so sorry. Dark-Eyed Gazelle, thank you for the super chat. That among Christians, there are so many interpretations of what the resurrected body is also an argument against the resurrection. I don't know. You could use it. You could use it as an argument that it's confusing, right? You could use it as an argument. It's kind of like what we do with contradictions, right? Someone might go, nope, the New Testament is historically accurate. Jesus was crucified. And then you might show them and say, well, how do you explain that they don't know what day he was crucified? In each crucifixion episode that we read in the 4 Gospels we have in our canon, he says different things. He does different things. Every episode has complete differences that often contradict each other. So then you could use this as a weapon to say, which one really happened then? Now, of course, they want to harmonize all of them. And they want to say that we just want to disharmonize. But like, you really can't harmonize all of it. Okay. You could try your best if you want hard enough. But like the day before Passover and the day of Passover, those are completely... Did Jesus get crucified the day before? Then they took him down and put him back on the day of? And then they took him down and buried him? Well, that doesn't work. And if you read the Gospels, it just doesn't work. So it becomes a problem for like what really happened. And I think you could use the same thing in a way of what you're trying to suggest here, Dark-Eyed Gazelle, that if Christians can't really wrap their heads around what is the real case, and I would argue beyond just among Christians, the New Testament has various ideas that they're trying to explain about the resurrection. I think when you get to Luke and John, and then Luke says flesh and bone isn't going to inherit the kingdom of God, but Jesus is there eating fish and stuff, that may actually be a growing evolution in the theology of the resurrection. And scholars have noticed this. So good observation. I think it could be used. I don't know how strong it is of itself, but it could add a layer to, like, Christians don't seem to have a full agreement on this issue. Hope that makes sense. But thank you, Dark-Eyed.
Need not put up a fight. I mean, it's not like Joseph was being killed, for the sake. It's not like he was being asked to recant or something and he refused and took death for that reason. He was just, of course, he had a message to spread. He was trying to annex Texas to make it a sort of, he was running for president to annex Texas and make it into a Mormon paradise. He's got things to do. So yeah, he shot back. And I've heard Trent say before, on the point of the martyrdom of the apostles, to bring it back to the New Testament, we're told sometimes that all of these disciples died for what they believed in. Of course, we have absolutely no evidence that any of them died for their faith, except for James, James, the brother of John, that is, that's mentioned in Acts as being beheaded by Herod, although we're not told why. And Trent has said in the past that, okay, we don't know that they died.
I'm glad he mentioned that. I'm glad he mentioned that, because I didn't know if he would, but that was one of the big problems I always have, is they always use the martyrdom, card. And it's like, well, Mormons can use the martyrdom card, and I'm glad he brought Mormonism in, because they do claim martyrdom. They literally use this for their profit. And many of the martyrs who died in Missouri, like that they had actually told to exterminate or drive out of the state because they were such a problem. Christians don't bat an eye at those martyrdoms. They don't think, ooh, that's convincing. I might become a Mormon because of this. No.
I believe, historically at least. But we do know, there's a video that you made, Trent, where you said, well, because of the death of their leader, because Jesus was put to death, that they must have been living in fear that a similar kind of thing could happen to them. Now, whatever you think about the death of Joseph Smith, you could say the same thing about him. Don't you think his followers might also be a little bit concerned that they're going to suffer under the same kind of violence, especially given how persecuted they were being by the US government and state governments? And yet the expansion rate of the early Mormon church is the same as the expansion rate of the early Christian community, as Rodney Stark famously pointed out. As for the physicality of Jesus, it's not something I want to die on here. Like this, I don't want to sort of. There's a joke in there about a hill. But I do think there are a few strange things. Firstly,
You could try to die on it, Alex. We won't be dead forever, my friend. That's how this thing works.
one hopes. Well, when I see you again, it will be interesting to try and high five and see what happens. I think there are a few mysteries in this for me. The first is like, okay, so much of this relies upon Paul, who I think is at best unclear about the physicality of Jesus. I mean, like,
yeah,
Trent has just defended Paul's use of the word spiritual in a way that would, like, spiritual body. He also, just to be clear, you mentioned Philippians, I think it's chapter 3, where Paul says, we will sort of take on a new body just like Christ. And you said Christ's physical body. The text doesn't say that. It says body, but it does not say physical body.
I'm glad you caught that.
Right. I understand that the use of the word body there probably means something corporeal to most readers, but it's not clear. In the same way that Trent hears the word spiritual body and says, well, Paul kind of meant this. When I hear the use of the word body, I can say, well, they kind of mean this. My reading is that I just kind of don't really know about the nature of the resurrected body. That's from Paul, who never actually met the risen Jesus. This is the thing. This is the key thing. Where can we go to find accounts of what the actual risen Jesus was actually like? Well, there are no eyewitness accounts. There are at best, even if you agree with the traditional authorship of the Gospels, then maybe there are two, right? But like, what is the nature of some of the post-resurrection experiences that we're given? I mean, firstly, there's just the problem that our earliest Gospel doesn't have any at all, and the fact that as the dates get later for the Gospels, the stories get more, and they also get more fanciful, and they also get more theological.
So you're referring to Mark's Gospel there, where there's an allusion to an appearance to Peter in Galilee, but we don't have that appearance narrated.
That's right. I mean, Mark's Gospel, at least the earliest manuscripts of Mark's Gospel, end with the women fleeing, afraid, saying nothing, which is sort of in keeping with Markan themes about cowardice and going away. There's lots to be said about the empty tomb. Maybe we can get into that in the third section or something. But these experiences, I mean, okay, so there's this idea of having a new resurrected body. Got a couple of mysteries. Firstly, Jesus in John's Gospel is still said to have the stigmata, that is the wounds in the hands and the side, right? To the extent that Thomas is allowed to see them, he's invited to see them. We don't know whether he actually touches them or not, so don't take that as evidence. We don't know whether
Caravaggio was correct.
In fact, he's almost certainly false in my view. It seems to me a better reading that as soon as Thomas is given the opportunity, bear in mind, people forget this, Jesus appears to the 11 and shows them his wounds. And they sort of believe in him. And then Thomas isn't among them. And then Thomas says, until I see the wounds. And we sort of lambast Thomas for not having enough faith, even though Jesus showed his wounds to the 11 first. Yeah. But no one has ever said to touch them. But the fact is, he's still got the stigmata. Now, I want to say, if Jesus' resurrected body is essentially the same one that he died on the cross with, why does he retain some of his sort of physical ailments, but not all of them? I mean, for example, Jesus walking on the road to Emmaus in Luke's Gospel, one of the most extraordinary stories in the fact that the two disciples, Cleopas and the other one, don't recognize Jesus. And yet when he sits down and breaks bread, they suddenly recognize him. Now, there could be some sort of miraculous intervention here, right? But looking at these as historical sources, it seems to me that this is the genre of mythology. I mean, I don't know if Trent believes the road to Emmaus to be a historical story of something that actually happened. It seems to me definitely mythological. That's not to say false or made up. It's just to say it's a particular genre. And certainly, if Jesus still had the wounds from his crucifixion, I think that a man who'd just undergone a brutal crucifixion a few days earlier would be noticeably recognizable as such. But it seems that Jesus' body is glorified. It seems that it's not something like, and yet when you get to John's Gospel, he's still got the wounds of his crucifixion, but I guess like only some of them. Yeah.
So this is such a, I had to let that ride for a minute just because there's so much. And I'll tell you, I'm not going to be able to review this whole thing today. I feel like we could pick it up. We'll get about halfway and then we could pick it up for maybe doing tomorrow, the day after. I think tomorrow, I should be available tomorrow to do the rest. But I want to say this, like, he's bringing up really good points. And when you read other ways of looking at this material from critical scholars like Bruce Loudon, let me show you what Bruce Loudon, I've said this before. I don't know if I've walked you through it. If you haven't seen this, Bruce Loudon, and by the way, I saw a comment, someone said that contradicts this idea, road to Emmaus, Someone brought up 1 John. That's right. Adetapor. Yeah, I was just reading that when you sent that. Beloved, we are God's children now. What we will be has not yet been revealed. What we do know is this: when he is revealed, we will be like him, for we will see him as he is. And all who have this hope in him purify themselves just as he is pure. The idea is that we don't know what he looks like. 1 John 3 verse 2, like, we aren't sure what he looks like, but whatever he's like, we will be like when he comes. That clearly isn't something that they would know about. The Gospels seem to be building off of it, like building legends off of this. So this is the text. I will put this in the chat so you can see it for yourself. Read it. I will not have time to get into this today, all of it. What did I just do? No, not that. This. The theophany. There we go. Theophany and recognition scenes. Luke 24. This is the road to Emmaus. Like, he brings up, if you play in the sandbox, a very, very interesting observation. How come Jesus is not recognizable, doesn't have all the scarring, doesn't seem to be obviously recognized as Jesus when he's walking on the road with the two disciples? And one of them is Cleopas, the other one isn't named ever. Bruce Loudon. This appears in one of his books, but this is free online. I'll put it in the chat. He highlights the Greek mythology behind this. Okay. Very interesting stuff. And he goes through a bunch of background before he does, showing scholars who say Luke's narrative has incorporated with evident skill a number of stylistic and dramatic devices characteristic of Greco-Roman epic in general. Early Christian writings demonstrate that Christians themselves saw parallels between their own sacred narratives and Greek myths. Acts 17, which is in the same author Luke wrote Acts, according to most scholars. Paul's appearance in Athens is premised upon such resemblances. Accordingly, I argue that Luke 24:13-53 in its larger contours is in dialogue with several episodes from the Odyssey. That Odyssey's coming out next month. And he goes on to point out this is a theophany. What happens is you have a divine man. You can have women too. You can go read the hymn to Demeter, the hymn to Corey, the Homeric hymn to Demeter, and you could find ancient stories where gods and goddesses are hidden identities around mortals. They don't even know it's them. It's in book 1 or 2. Is it Odyssey 3? So it's Odyssey 3. I thought it was book 1 or 2. No, it is Odyssey 1. Okay, Odyssey 1. No. Let me get to the exact spot. Let me see. Is it Odyssey book 3? It's the part where Telemachus. Yeah, here it is. So the elaborate sacrifice finished, Nestor converses with his guest. Theophanies employ considerable irony in the discrepancy between the external audience's awareness of the guest's actual divine nature and the other character's limited perception, prompted by the stranger's seemingly mortal form. Learning Telemachus' identity, he advises him that since Athena frequently aided his father during the war, it is likely the goddess will help him as well. Nestor does not recognize that mentor is in fact Athena. All right, let me tell you the story. I'll come back to me. Telemachus is on a run. And for those of you, I don't know if you're as excited as I am. If you don't, not excited to see the Odyssey, I am. I can't wait to see this new Odyssey movie that's coming out next month or in July. I'm definitely excited. Matt Damon is starring as Odysseus, and I want to see this. But Odysseus is at war. His son Telemachus is at home, and suitors are wanting to take his wife, Telemachus' mom. Telemachus gets empowered one day by the goddess Athena. He goes and tells the suitors, get the hell out of my house. He mans up and lets them know, like, quit. I'm not taking your shit anymore. They target him and want to kill him now. He has to flee. He gets on a ship. He heads out with his mentor. And who's the other guy that's with him? Nestor. So Nestor, a mentor, which is in the disguise, it's disguised as a man, the mentor, but it's really the goddess Athena. They don't even know that the goddess Athena is there with them. And Telemachus is really, really sad. He says, so let's see. A skeptical Telemachus, however, replies, Nestor does not recognize the mentor as in fact Athena, but his piety enables him to perceive that she would aid Odysseus' son. A skeptical Telemachus, however, replies that he does not believe the gods would help him. The goddess, however, unrecognized by his side, will not allow his erroneous assumption to stand. Correcting him, she puns on his name at the same time. This is where it gets in the weeds. Telemachus, she says, but it's really a he. What sort of word has fled from the fence of your teeth? Easily a god, should he wish, can save a man even from a distance. When Athena says, even from a distance, she repeats the first element of Telemachos. Telemachos is his name. Literally, fighter from a distance, humorously correcting him, seeming lack of piety. What happened was Telemachus said, look, I wish the gods would protect me and have my back like they had my father who's fighting, in the Trojan War. And they clearly won't. She corrects him and says, no, Mr. Fighter from afar. The gods can still help you even from a distance, from afar. In Luke 24, Cleopas, the name Cleopas, has a lot to do with glory. So Cleopas, another unnamed disciple, now walks toward Emmaus. The resurrected Jesus joins them in the mid-conversation. Unrecognized, he asks what they are discussing. When Cleopas answers that the stranger must be the only one in Jerusalem who does not know the events of the last few days, Luke 24:18, we quickly recognize the dynamics of the Odyssey episodes we have just discussed, and its favorite form of irony. The three characters behave as if a positive theophany is taking place. The characters, without being able to recognize that he is present, Jesus is there, they don't see that it's him. Just like a female goddess is disguised as a male mentor. They don't know that she's right there. And I think in that episode, she flies away like a bird. As soon as she does that, she flies away. I could be wrong, but that's a thing Athena does. Anyway, it goes on to say, he was the actual protagonist. When Jesus replies playing along, in a sense, what sort of events? He extends the irony into an almost comic modality. So who is this Cleopas? Attempts to find a historical basis for this character are misguided. Bruce Loudon says there was no historical Cleopas. You're barking up the wrong tree when we're dealing with mythology. He says, I suggest you're barking up the wrong tree. Instead, we might consider the clues his name provides. Basic misunderstanding of even this has hindered recognition of his larger narrative function. Cleopas is a truncated version of Cleopatris, a common Greek name. It occurs as early as the Iliad, but with components reversed. For Achilles' boon companion, Patroclus. Cleos, a keyword in Homeric epic, can mean fame, glory, or report. Added to the common term for father. Compound names of this sort are often possessive, making it likely meaning the father's glory. So Cleopas likely means the father's glory. The particular meaning I propose here, the scholar proposes, as is typical of many characters in myth, Cleopas is a speaking name, with other characters aware of its meaning and assuming that the audience is as well. Kleos is probably already an archaic word, deliberate archaism often being characteristic of mythical narratives. In the Greek of the New Testament, occurring only in 1 Peter 2:20, which may support the view that its author is not the disciple, but a well-educated Hellenist. Jesus himself will shortly use the New Testament's preferred term for glory, doxa, instead of Cleopas, as we discuss below. To his request for clarification, Cleopas replies that Jesus was a dynamic prophet. So remember, here's the Emmaus Road story. There's this unknown character walking with Cleopas and another unnamed disciple. 3 of them, just like the Odyssey. As they're walking, they're all sad. Man, we thought he was the one. And the guy's asking him, like, hold on, what? What are you talking about? So he says, Jesus was a dynamic prophet whom he'd hoped would ransom Israel, but had been betrayed and crucified. Though he knows others who claim to have seen Jesus since his death, he does not seem fully persuaded. Almost like a doubting Thomas scene, okay? All the dynamics present in Odyssey 3 are in evidence. As with Telemachus, Cleopas is skeptical of God's power. And as Athena corrects Telemachus, Jesus now corrects Cleopas. As Athena's correction of Telemachus features a play on the literal meaning of his name, fighter from afar, so now does Christ's correction of Cleopas. The unrecognized Jesus emphasizes that it was necessary for the Christ to suffer before entering into his glory, his doxa, the New Testament's usual word in place of the more archaic kleos. All this, as with Athena's, well, Mr. Fighter from afar, a god can save a man even from afar. is to say this. Jesus is saying, yes, Mr. Glory of the Father, so the Christ could enter into his glory. It's a pun. And he goes on about this. So I'm reading this narrative. No wonder people like, Alex are playing in the sandbox going, this is odd. Why don't they recognize them? But like when you're dealing with your opponent, who is Trent Horn, who takes these things literally to the bank, does not even at a chance glance at this and say, maybe Luke's just writing a theophany tale and having Jesus as this hidden identity person. It's just, it's fictive. I don't think he allows that. It's not on the table. It's not even an option at the buffet. I wish it was, which is why MythVision exists. Because when I started this channel because everyone was either doing this kind of stuff, playing literally, historically in the sandbox only, or some other thing, and they weren't really highlighting the fictive literary nature of a lot of this stuff. And I want to give that more of a shake. I don't think we give it enough credit when it needs to be looked at as fictive. And I think if you just read the Road to Emmaus story as a fictive theophany tale, where hospitality is also showing up. So you have theophany and you have xenios. I believe that's the Greek term properly pronounced, if I'm not mistaken. Xenios is this, it's Xenios or something. It's this idea that you want to show hospitality to a stranger because you never know, they might be a god in disguise. It happens with Abraham and the 3 strangers who appear to him. And in fact, it's the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah. Most people think same-sex relationships is the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah, and they're mistaken that it's actually that they aren't showing hospitality to the strangers. And this is an ancient concept that obviously Greeks capitalize on as well. All right, let's go a little further. Ah, okay. Is there no sound? Did I mess up? Oh, well, guess what? I'm clapping, and it's a good part. He literally says, and he doesn't say the details I said. Let me go back a little bit here. My gosh, you're hanging out with me and nothing's going on. I'm glad someone yelled at me in the chat. Let me know you can hear this.
But kept the stigmata as some kind, like I think Augustine. And
okay, is that
like
better?
Right, about how it was kind of like a trophy of his victory, and I don't know why wouldn't the blood on his head from the crown of thorns be a literal trophy of his victory?
Press one if it's working.
Maybe because it's a sort of a good narrative point. It's a very sort of striking image that can be used in what is essentially a theological and non-historical story.
And just to clarify there, would you see the gospel resurrection stories as all taking on this mythological character?
I don't know what the intentions of the writers were. I don't know. With the Road to Emmaus, it seems to me almost certain that the intention there is mythological.
That's what
I'm not sure about John's gospel. Matthew's gospel is a little bit more sparse. I mean, the appearance is a little bit more sort of subdued. But one interesting thing that I want to point out is that, like, so Matthew's gospel says that the 11 disciples go to the mountain in Galilee where Jesus had told them to go. What mountain? When? I think that a key insight into the nature of the resurrection, the resurrected bodies, is the earlier transfiguration of Jesus. Where Jesus takes 3 of his closest disciples, Peter, James, and John, up a mountain where suddenly his body is transfigured. He's glowing. His robes are said to be whiter than anyone could bleach them. And then suddenly Moses and Elijah appear. And Peter, by the way, Luke's gospel says that these guys are on the edge of sleep, which is a little bit odd, right? Like, it's a strange detail to include, as if that kind of matters. Hypnagogic visions are one of the most, by which I mean visions on the edge of sleep, like between sleep and wakefulness, are one of the most common times that people have those kinds of visions, or when they're sort of half asleep, implying that maybe something like that was going on here. And they see these figures. And I suppose I want to know what the nature of this appearance is. I know Trent's talked about this before, and he says, well, look, Jesus was physically there and he was transfigured. It wasn't some kind of vision. But what about like Moses and Elijah? Elijah's a bit tricky because Elijah said to ascend into heaven, but Moses, we're told in Deuteronomy 34, is buried in the desert in Moab. So when Moses appeared on the mountain with Jesus, did he sort of climb up out of the grave and walk over and up the mountain physically? And if so, how did they just suddenly appear? It seems to me, in other words, much more visionary. Now, whatever that experience, I think Rudolf Boltzmann thinks that the Transfiguration was originally a post-resurrection narrative that got put earlier in the narrative. Now, why might that have happened? Well, for me, it seems clearly visionary. So maybe that's one reason for not having it as part of these post-resurrection appearances. But also specifically, Jesus says after the Transfiguration to the 3 disciples not to say anything to anyone about what they've seen until after he's risen from the dead.
Because they're being given a glimpse of the resurrection body. Is that?
Well, quite possibly, right? And then they're walking down the mountain, and Mark's gospel says that they were talking to each other about what it means to rise from the dead. And given the context of what they've just seen, they think, do you think what we just saw, this sort of strange apparition of like Moses, do you think that's kind of the thing that we're talking about? Also, I mean, crucially, I think this is really interesting.
By the way, I don't want him to go. He can't go off that. That's a really important point. Is Rudolf Boltzmann's point of, and it wasn't just him, there were others who also echo this same sentiment, that they think that the Transfiguration episode was in the wrong place, that it may have belonged as after the resurrection. That episode should have been there, and that they go on the mountain and they see him in his almost glorified semblance, right, after death. I don't know what to make of that. If that's the case, that would tell you that the texts we have been kind of butchered, and we don't really have it the way it was when they really initially wrote these materials. It makes a lot of sense, though, to think about why on a mountain you would have this glorified resemblance of Jesus taking place after the resurrection. And in fact, the first time I ever heard about this was through Robert Price, who can articulate it much better than I can and explain it in greater depth. But there are a lot of people who still think there's something to that it could be in the wrong place in the narrative, out of order. Papias constantly talks about gospels being out of order and all that. So you kind of wonder, is there something to that? Who knows?
John, what's the most embarrassing verse of the New Testament?
It's the verse in the mini apocalypse in Mark, according to C.S. Lewis.
C.S. Lewis says it's the most embarrassing verse.
This generation will pass away before all of these things take place.
Why is that so embarrassing? Because Mark says, some of you standing here today will not taste death until you see the kingdom and the Son of Man in his glory. What is the very next thing that happens in every single one of the synoptic gospels? It's the Transfiguration. It says, 6 or 8 days later, Jesus. So he says, some of you here will not taste death until you see the kingdom and the glory. And then 6 days later, he takes them up a mountain and he transfigures before them. And there's an apparition of Moses and Elijah. And Peter gets confused and wants to build them a tabernacle and all this kind of stuff. And then there's a voice from heaven and a cloud comes and descends. This kind of extraordinary visionary experience, which I think is supposed to mimic the kind of thing that we're seeing in the resurrection, which is why in Matthew's gospel, when it says, they went to the mountain where Jesus told them to go, like, what mountain are we talking about? We're never told about this. It seems plausible that it's the same mountain as the Mount of Transfiguration, given that it's in Galilee. And not only that, but when they go up the mountain, which seems like a very specific place to see a physical person, why up the mountain? Some of them doubted.
Yeah, we should.
Why would they doubt?
Think about what he just said. I have to come back, and this time I'm going to try and remember to not mute it or accidentally not have it hooked up here. Let me show you what's going on here, Matthew, because when I first saw this years ago, I was like, what? That's not very helpful. I mean, if I'm reading this and I'm looking at it critically, Matthew 28, after the Sabbath, as the first day of the week was dawning, Mary Magdalene and other Mary went to see the tomb. Suddenly there was a great earthquake, for the angel For an angel of the Lord descended from heaven, came and rolled back the stone. So in Mark, the stone's already rolled away. So this is already problematic between Mark and Matthew. This is Matthew, written after Mark. The tomb is already opened when the women approach it in Mark. Here, the women show, and then an angel descends, and a great earthquake. And the angel then rolls away the stone. And notice, right? The stone's rolled away, and he sits on the stone. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes white as snow. Here we are with this angelic, heavenly kind of body, thing. The amount of transfiguration kind of stuff, too. For fear of him, the guards shook and became like dead men. For fear of him, the guards shook and became like dead men. But the angel said to the women, do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he has been raised. As he said, come see the place where he laid. So one thing I want you to notice here, though, is Jesus isn't even in the tomb. In Mark, the tomb's already open and he's missing. In Matthew, the tomb's closed. And once the angel moves the stone, he's still not there. So it's like, I think Matthew is already dealing with people who are probably already like arguing against Christianity. And he's like, we got to deal with some of these people who are trying to see holes in our narrative. So he adds like, oh, the tomb wasn't even gone. Like the stone was there. So there's no way that their bodies could have been stolen, or that there's any way, shape, or form that Jesus didn't rise from the dead. They're trying the best they can to solve the problem with Mark. Then go quickly and tell his disciples he has been raised, and indeed he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him. This is my message for you. You remember that in Mark, go ahead to Galilee, but the women tell no one. So they left the tomb quickly with fear and great joy and ran and tell the disciples. If you go look at Mark, let me get a second Bible side by side. I believe I'm able to actually, let me do this. Let me go back. There's got to be a way to, we're back at 28. There we go. Let's do this. Compare. This is Cross Bible. I believe I'm able to get a second verse. Compare another Bible version. No, switch between version comparison and version view. Okay, I've got to get familiar with the software. I've got the highest plan on his site now, so I can actually do this. But anyway, let's just go to the part where he's doubting, because I wanted to compare Mark and show you they don't tell any of the disciples, but then they go and tell everyone right away, right here in Matthew. So there's already a contradiction in what Mark's saying versus Matthew. Suddenly Jesus met them and said, greetings. And they came to him and took hold of his feet and worshiped him. Wow, that was quick. Then Jesus said to them, do not be afraid, and go tell my brothers and sisters to go to Galilee. There they will see me. The report of the guard. While they were going, some of the guard went to the city, told the chief priest everything that had happened. After the priests had assembled with the elders, they devised a plan to give a large sum of money to the soldiers. Can you imagine being like bribed after seeing a divine situation like that? You're able to just take a little bribe and you're supposedly going to just deny what just happened? I very much doubt it. You must say to his disciples came by night and stole away while we were asleep. If this comes to the governor's ears, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble. So they took the money and did as they were directed, and this story is still told among the Judeans to this day. The commissioning of the disciples, now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but they doubted. That's a wild statement to make, that they doubted. And that's where this face from Alex O'Connor is infamously going to be remembered in this debate. This face right here. That face right there. Am I zooming in? It's not zooming in. Okay, either way. That shocking face. Let's play it back just a second so you can remember what we just read.
See a physical person way up the mountain. Some of them doubted. Why would they doubt? If I, John, I've known you for years now. If you died and I saw you as I see you now, talking to me, as physical as you are, I might sort of go like, oh, I don't know if I can believe, but I would not be able to be convinced that it was you if it were not physically stood in front of me. Yet some of those disciples doubted. Whereas if I had some kind of visionary experience with a few other people and some said, I think that was John come back, I might say, you know what, I'm not sure about that, guys. Yeah. In other words, I think there are some hints there. But
Okay. So it's almost 3 hours in. Okay. I think for me so far in this debate. And if you have any questions, comments, whatever, feel free to super chat your questions. I'm happy to take them before we wrap things up. But I think the moral that I would take away from this is, if he's not appearing to you, if you aren't experiencing this directly, and they were doubting 2,000 years ago, if you take it as history, which I say huge, massive blocks of salt on that. But if you do grant it, okay. If they're doubting, how much more should you? Like, if I start a cult tomorrow and claim something happened and it's a little bit too good to be true, and in my own narrative, my disciples doubt that this is like the case. They're not really certain, even though in some cases it acts like that's the case. How much more should you, reading that material later, you have no way to actually fact check or test this stuff and like know, how much more should you doubt if they were doubting it? That's why I wrote an article in Academia. It's the only article I have. Let me get it actually. Academia.edu. Just look up Derek Lambert. And I called it the minimal doubts argument. Derek Lambert, people. One paper. Here we go. It's the only one I've had time to write. I mean, I've written several documentary scripts, but I haven't written more like academia stuff. I'm not logged in. So, minimal doubts argument for Jesus. If you want to go to Academia, you're more than happy to go read. No one is knocking on my door telling me about their Lord and Savior Romulus Quirinius, who ascended on high, was called the King, Son of God, and Father of the greatest city ever known to man, Rome. But if they did, I think I'm pretty sure what they would say. There's eyewitness testimony that he appeared after his ascension into heaven to a trustworthy senator named Proculus Julius, charging him to tell the Romans that it is the will of heaven that my Rome should be head of all the world. And it came true, just as he said it would. Therefore, you must believe or be damned forever. And I go on and do some fun stuff in this, but I have had a lot of people respond to this positively and negatively, I think. People weren't fans of it, but I pull on this yarn throughout the New Testament material about doubt. And there's a lot of doubting that goes on in these stories that kind of hint at a lot of Christians seem to have had doubt even back then. How much more so should we, thousands of years removed from any of this primary original stuff? I think we should. Anyway. Checking on you all. What's up, Mandy? Good to see you, Mandy. Kent, thanks for showing up. Really appreciate you being here. John, good to see you. And thanks to the mods who are always here hanging out, trying to keep things from going into complete oblivion. I really appreciate that. Well, obviously, the reason I'm not sure where exactly this part is, it is misplaced to serve as an apologetic to Jesus' prophecy just a few verses earlier. Huh. Okay, I'm gonna wrap things. I'm gonna wrap things up here because I'm gonna go eat some dinner, and I'm gonna pick up round 2. Here's where we are. Round 2 tomorrow. I might even have a guest join me for fun. We're almost halfway. Well, we're about 38 minutes in, and we got like an hour, roughly under an hour, 50 something minutes of play left. And we're just getting to the juicy parts. So I'm glad we didn't like unload all of this. You know what I mean? Really, really appreciate it. Elijah, Jesus. What's going on here? George Hall, thank you for the happy birthday. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I'll continue round 2 tomorrow. If this is fun, if you guys are having fun, I am. This has been good. Alex is always interesting. I think so too. And look, I didn't watch all this. I saw the very beginning part. I started watching, just barely started. And then I always make these comments. And then like 2-3 minutes later, Alex like confirms what I'm saying about it. And then he's like, no, I think that's mythological. And I was like, oh shit, Alex is read. Look, this guy he's a He reads. Like, this guy, I know he reads. I can tell when he talks about stuff. I'm like, okay, awesome. It is my birthday yesterday, X Music. So I didn't do the stream. Today is my birthday stream. I just figure I'd come on here and hang out with you all, do what I love most, talk about this stuff. But yeah, Alex is a smart cookie, and so is Trent, though. Trent's smart too, but he's an apologist. But I have to give it to him. Of all the apologists out there, he's one of the top that I think acts in good faith. He's a decent chap to engage with, and I hope to engage with him in the future in person, as long as we can make that happen. And yeah, there's a few other apologists that I like, that I think are really decent people, even if we disagree. There are some, though, that are just, I don't know if you've been paying attention to how chaotic it's getting. There's a civil war right now going on amongst Christians. I mean, like, big time. The Eastern Orthodox crews are absolutely calling every other Christian non-Christians, and they're very toxic. Like, this group is, my wife, I did a video about the Andrew versus David Wood thing, and she suffered with me for 5 minutes on the way to the grocery store, picking up some groceries for dinner. And she just goes, that guy says he's a Christian. And I'm like, yeah, he says he's a Christian. She's like, I don't think Christians should be listening to that guy. My wife's not even a Christian. I mean, she thinks there's something out there, right? She's not like a Christian like that. She's just much more like, she thinks there's some higher power or something, whereas I'm much more skeptical. And anyway, her immediate reaction was enough for her to be like, that guy does not sound like someone any Christian should be listening to. Jesse, thank you so much for that. Appreciate that. Mandy, you're on Discord too. If a lot of people want to get a hold of you, they can go to MythVision's Discord and check you out. You got a lot of stuff. In fact, I did buy one of those books you recommended a while back. Here it is. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, though. Magic Ritual Art, The Power of Satire, which is cool. Cool little cover and stuff. But anyway, yeah, I got that book because of you. Oh, I got another book recently, and I'm bragging about this. You really should check this out. I must cover more outside of Bible stuff, outside of just Jesus. I've got to get Apollonius Tyana. We got to talk about the Dionysiaca. And Tim Whitmarsh is a friend of mine and also excellent classicist. I'm looking forward to talking to him if he ever gets the time to talk about this massive book. The longest epic about Dionysus. Must read. I have never read the Dionysiaca, but I've read like excerpts from it. And I tell you, I bet you there's some really interesting stuff going on in this book. Supposedly the guy who wrote it was a Christian. That's also shocking. Dark Eyed Gazelle, thank you so much for that. Happy birthday. Appreciate you. Honestly, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Yeah. Happy belated birthday, Coffee. Forgive me. Yeah, happy belated birthday. I hope you had a decent one. I did. Again, thank you for that super chat. I got to hang out with the fam. I took a nap too yesterday. I was tired. I've been working so hard. And, work can drain you. And yesterday I was like, I'm going to just like literally not care about working at all and just relax. But then I felt guilty. Even on my birthday, I felt guilty. I was like, this morning I was at the gym. I'm like, all right, I got to hurry up. I got to get this. I was doing triceps today and chest. And I was just like, I got to get home and hurry up and get to work and do something. And I didn't know what I was going to do today, to be honest. But I had this on the shelf in my mind of like, this recent debate. Let's talk about this recent debate and, go from there. And so we ended up reviewing some of this Alex O'Connor stuff with Trent Horn. Thank you. Really appreciate it. My family's Eastern Orthodox. It's been very bizarre to see all the modern Western online Orthodox converts and how horribly they behave. That's so true. And I've heard a lot of the actual orthodox people who are not fans of the online crews who disown them. And the more they do, the better. The more they do, the better. Absolutely. So I just hope more and more disassociate, not being part of that crowd. Keeping it real with you. All right, fam. I'm going to go eat. I really appreciate that, the support, Dark Eyed, again, and everybody else who's sending super chats and being members of the channel and liking the video and sharing the video and commenting and all that stuff. It all helps. It all keeps us going so we can keep going and educating the world, helping people to see things. I'm also fascinated with this stuff. I'm not just like interested in debunking the religion. I think it's really cool to find out why we believe. Why do humans do this? What does this give us, and why did we do what we did to begin with? But also, can we wise up and not need those things that way anymore and find other ways to cope with reality? I think we can. It's just going to take some damn time. You know, it's going to take some time. Anyway, I love y'all. I'm outie. I'm going to go eat. Drop a comment after the stream. Go check out Power of Satire that Manny Moorhall talked about. Get a copy of the Dionysiaca. I plan on doing interviews with him. I want to do some more stuff with people that aren't just in the Bible, like beyond. Love y'all. Never forget, we are MythVision. I'll catch you tomorrow, okay? We're going to finish this tomorrow.
Son, do you want to know what the truth is? After this, there's no turning back. You take the blue pill and you wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill and you stay in Wonderland, and I show you just how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.